Water District. All right, thank you. Meeting of the Alameda County Water District of February 10th, 2022 at 6 p.m. Roll call, please.
Director Sethi,
Here.
Akbari,
Here.
Gunther,
Here.
Huang,
Here.
and Weed.
Here. I know that this time we have the salute to the flag, but we are running consecutive meetings, and we did have a salute to the flag in the prior meeting immediately before this. So in order to move through, I would suggest that we move on to public comments without objection. So,
Weed, if it would be okay with you, I'd like to just share
yes,
some quick housekeeping.
please input.
That way everybody knows, how to make comment and is prepared to engage with the board. So first of all, I just want to say good evening to everyone. My name is Ed Stevenson. I serve as the district's general manager. So welcome to this meeting of the board of directors. Members of the public may participate in this public meeting either by using the Zoom application or by telephone. And if you're participating via Zoom, we ask that all participants mute their microphones unless speaking. You could also be placed on mute by the district secretary. The district secretary will unmute participants at the appropriate times when the board is receiving public comments. And in Zoom, you'll be able to view presentation materials as they're presented to the board. And at any time, you can submit a question or raise your hand in the Zoom app, and you'll be called upon at the appropriate time. If you are participating via telephone audio, again, we ask that you mute your phone, and you can view the meeting agenda, the staff reports, and presentation materials, which have all been posted to the district's website at acwd.org, and you can follow along that way. And if you're using your Zoom app on your telephone, you can raise your hand and unmute yourself using the controls. *6 to mute and unmute yourself, and *9 to raise your hand. And those participating by telephone will, of course, also be given opportunities to address the board. And as you've seen, this Zoom webinar is being recorded and will be made available to the public for future viewing. Again, thank you all for attending, and that completes my housekeeping remarks.
Thank you very much. At this time, we have public comments for items which are not on our agenda this evening. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board on general topics or other items? I see none. Let us move then to the.
Can you hear me?
I'm sorry.
John Wade, Mr. Wade, you can't hear me?
Please, who is speaking, please?
Phil. I
Yes.
talked to you a month ago over the phone. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good, good. I just don't see my face, so I don't know if you guys see me or not.
We only see a name and a hand, and it looks like you may be speaking on one device because another device is showing that you're muted. So I don't know. On the communication, I'm confused.
I'm confused too. Oh, man. Well, at least you can hear me. I had a couple of issues we were talking about earlier. The last communication we had about putting in these boxes, the valve boxes you hear for all the residents.
Yes.
Well, I refused mine. So I don't know what I'm expecting a love letter from the ACWD telling me I have to be compliant, but they did not want. I told you I did. I told the board last time I didn't want that. I thought it was an invasion of my privacy, and I really didn't care for it. One person said that we're not spying, and as I thought about it the last couple of weeks, it seems as though it is a spying technique. The reason I say that is, say something happens with my water line. I go to my insurance company. The first thing they're going to do is get their lawyers to subpoena ACW's records on me, and then they can deem whether I'm going to get insured or not. And I feel like I'm going to be just like the fire victims in Santa Rosa, but they were underinsured or not told exactly what their coverage would be, and they're left homeless. I know it sounds kind of a little bigger than this, but I just wanted to, that's my feeling towards it. And I wanted to kind of, quite frankly, use the water. You and I were talking previously about giving you a letter about, recognizing people that want to farm and do plant their own vegetables. Vallejo has that. One of my friends is using that format to this day. And I was wondering, have you heard anything about that too?
All right.
My letter.
Two thoughts. One, I can refer this to staff to respond to your question. The next, have you had an opportunity to talk to the ACWD staff on your concerns?
The last meeting.
After the meeting, but not since the meeting. It's not outside the public meeting. Had you had a chance to talk with our staff to discuss your concerns?
I would not know who to go to, sir.
I did not understand your response, but
I would not know who to reach. Who would I reach?
all right.
You can reach
Who would
out.
I talk to?
Our general manager is here. Let him give his contact if he might.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. You can reach out to me, Philip. I think it's Philip, right? Feel free to reach out to me, ed.stevenson, STEVENSON @acwd.com or 510-668-4201. And I'd be happy to talk with you and arrange for additional information. I think it's key that you are fully informed with the facts, and then certainly we're willing to work with all of our customers.
Okay.
Thank you. And I'm trying to think, we have your contact information? Or if
Yeah,
we
you-
need to,
Yeah, you do. You have my phone number, Mr. Wheat.
all right, well, thank you. All right, I have a second hand, which is from Noah Arribas.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, please.
I just had a general comment. I don't think it's a part of the rate discussions today, but in the general rate chart and for ACWD on miscellaneous charges, and this is a minor comment, but specifically for the electric vehicle charges at the building, the district charges at $1.50 per hour, which is abnormal and not what I think most of the industry and state is moving towards, which is to charge per kilowatt hour. So for newer electric cars, that's fine. They pretty much can charge faster than the ability of the charge points. And it works out to a rate of about 25 cents per kilowatt hour, which is about what the prevailing rates are, and makes it equitable for the district and that nobody's really making money off of it. But if you have a newer plug-in hybrid or a lot of older electric vehicles, they charge at about half the rate. So essentially those vehicles are paying double for the same amount of time that they're on the charger. And just based on the amount of usage that I see on the charge points, I think, the district might be not serving parts of the community that could be using the, charge points at this point, or members of the staff that might be able to use it, and underutilizing that resource that's right there. I mean, it's essentially the equivalent if you had a Prius and you were going to fill up your tank with 10 gallons, but you were charged 20 gallons because the pump was a little bit slower. So it's just, I just wanted to consider that rate change to a change per kilowatt hour, which is what the city uses. It's what most commercial chargers charge by. And perhaps the intent by charging by hour was just to make sure cars didn't occupy the space too long. That can still be added, after 2 or 4 hours if it looks like at a certain point that cars are just staying there too long. But for the rest of the time, for most of these older EVs or plug-in cars, they would finish within 2 or 3 hours. So I don't think it would be an issue. So just something I thought, I contacted the district before in the past, and they said, at least the people I contacted to weren't able to, discuss changing the rates. That would be, part of, maybe suggested bringing it to the open forum. So I just wanted to bring that for the consideration. I think it could serve the community more, and there would be no loss to the district because Like I said, newer, faster charging cars would be charged, the same rate. They would be maxing out on the charge point, but you'd have an additional market for slower charging cars. And as of now, it doesn't seem like those plugs are being used to their full extent. So that's all.
Well, thank you. For our General Manager, Mr. Stevenson, did you have any opportunity to follow up on this item?
Thank you, President Weed. It's my understanding that those charging stations were installed under contract with an entity that by the terms of the contract, certain rates would apply for a period of time. So we can look into whether there's flexibility to adjust those rates, but there may not be. So I would have to look into it a little bit more, but I appreciate the comment and the input.
Thank you.
I would also note that technology is changing and evolving on charging, and so the opportunity to review the status of the technology we're using. So, thank you. Any comment from members of the board on this item? There being none, are there any? Oh, please.
Sorry, President Wee. I just want to pile on and say, Mr. Stevenson, please look into it, because once in a while you do see my car out there.
Sure. Yeah, we'll certainly look into it. And like I say, we may be contractually bound to a certain rate structure because those charging stations did not cost our ratepayers any money, to my knowledge. It was partially a convenience for our customers and staff, and also an attempt to kind of try and do the right thing from an environmental standpoint. But contractually, we may be bound to a certain structure, but that's what we'll look into.
Director Gunther here. I see Mr. Nishimara's hand may be up too, but question before Ken, I'm going to jump in front of Ken here. Charging stations, do we have plans? I know our vehicles are all likely going to be migrating towards electric. I'm assuming we're going to have some plans to put some charging stations. I don't believe I've seen any in the parking lot, the employee parking lot, correct?
There's none there now currently, Director Gunther, and I would want to be careful not to engage in too much discussion here, given that it's not an item on the agenda.
That's true. Okay.
We can provide more information in the future.
Something to look at. Okay.
Something to be added to a committee agenda. Thank you. All right, fine. Thank you very much. Mr. Kenan?
Yeah, well, now that you've opened the Pandora's box about EV chargers, I feel compelled to pile on. I do support the previous public comment about switching the way the billing is operated. In fact, the California Department of Measurement Standards actually has passed a rule that requires that all chargers switch to kilowatt hour, that is billing by energy as opposed to billing by time. The rule does require all new installations after the 1st of January 2021 to be compliant with that. Existing chargers that were in place before the 1st of January 2020 actually have a very long period until the 1st of January of 2031 to comply. In addition, the rule does exempt stations operated by public entities and municipalities, of which ACWD is one. So even though the district is not compelled under this new DMS rule to switch to kilowatt hour billing, I strongly urge the district to follow the spirit of the DMS rule and at its earliest opportunity switch to kilowatt hour billing, because that is the fair thing to do. You're charging for the energy. And as the previous speaker said, if there are issues with people not moving their cars afterwards, you can always, the rules do still allow the imposition of a penalty rate for cars that are not charging but still connected to the charger. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh yes, we have one more public comment. Ms. Monica Ashford, please, you're on.
Hi, good evening. It's the first time that I attend a meeting like this one, so I'd like to thank you for the opportunity I'm not sure if I speak out of turn or if it's now a time to talk about the rates.
Rates will be on our agenda later. This is for items which are not on our agenda.
I see. Okay.
All right, thank you. All right, if there's no other comments under board comment, general comments, let us move then to the consent calendar. Is there anyone who wishes to add items to the consent calendar?
I'll do so. I'll move to add items 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, and 5.5 to the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded by Director Sethi and Director Gunther. Roll call, please.
Director Sethi,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
All right,
Huang,
Aye.
and Weed.
Aye. Do we have a
And
motion?
I will move to approve the consent calendar as amended.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded without further comment. Roll call, please.
Director Sethi,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
All right,
Huang,
Aye.
and Weed.
Aye. So next we have item 5.6, which is the discussion of rates and a public hearing to consider revision to the district's water rates and the addition of a water storage emergency stage rates, adoption of resolutions amending the district's rate and fee schedule regarding water-related rates and charges, including water storage emergency stage rates and private fire service rates, the customer assistance program, facilities connection charges, and miscellaneous fees and charges, and finding that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. I also have a fairly lengthy statement to read prior to the discussion of our rates in order to meet our legal criteria. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome you the public's participation in this evening's public hearing. This public hearing will be on the proposed revisions of the district's water rates and the addition of the water storage emergency stage rates and the consideration of resolutions amending the district's rate and fee scheduling regarding water-related rates and charges, including service charges, water storage rates, water storage emergency stage rates, and private fire service rates, customer assistance program, facilities connection charges, and miscellaneous fees and charges, and finding that these amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. First, the process. I will open a public hearing, and the ACWD staff will make a presentation. Presentation materials can be viewed online at the meeting or as accessed through the district's website with the agenda and materials for this meeting. That is www.acwd.org. Upon conclusion of the presentation, the board and ACWD staff will receive public comments and protest. The board and staff will receive all comments without responding. Upon conclusion of the public comments and/or protest, the board will request input from the staff as appropriate to respond to questions and comments that were raised by the public, deliberate on the issues, and then close the public hearing. We have traditionally used a 5-minute timer for public comments, which is by other agencies quite generous, but it appears that we have 33 participants, including staff and board. So I'm confident that we need not be too draconian when it comes to the speaker's time and their opportunities. I encourage you, just the members of the public, to open their comments. Next, speaker request. Since the hearing is being conducted online and by teleconference, persons who wish to make comments can indicate so verbally when we open public comment portion of the hearing. Anyone who would like to make public comments can do so by raising their hand in the Zoom app, submitting your comments or questions in the chat feature of the Zoom, or by speaking up verbally when invited to do so. For those participating online that may not have a microphone on their computer, please dial in by phone at the number given on the agenda. Zoom allows you to use your telephone dial pad *6 to mute and *9 to raise your hand. People participating by telephone will also be given opportunities to address the board directly. Please state your name and service address when making a verbal comment. Providing this information is voluntary. However, if you haven't already submitted a written protest and would like your comment to be counted as a protest against the proposed rate increases, stating your name and service address and intent to protest will be and can be used for this purpose. I'd like to open the public hearing and have staff make the presentation, please.
Thank you, President Weed. And before we move on to staff's presentation, I just wanted to kind of do a quick review for the record and for those present about the various noticing provisions that we've employed here to make sure that the public was adequately noticed about this hearing. So in addition to the required notice in accordance with Proposition 218, the district published a notice of the proposed water rates and charges in this public hearing in the Argus on January 28th and again on February 4th. The notice was also published in the Tri-City Voice on February 1st and February 8th. Notice and additional information was posted to the district's website and via multiple social media posts, and a community information meeting was held on January 20. The Proposition 218 notice, which was previously referenced, includes details of the rates proposal and instructions for submitting written protests. This notice was mailed to every property owner, every ACWD customer, and all other mailing addresses within the district's service area in late December. Finally, a separate notice providing details of the previously approved rates and charges and changes to adjustment for inflation based upon the Engineering News Record Cost Index for the San Francisco Bay Area and continued phase-in of the equity buy-in component was mailed on January 7th to the cities of Fremont, Newark, and Union City, and to developers, engineers, builders, and subdividers that are involved in ongoing or planned or potential developments within the district service area. So with that, I'll ask ACWD's Director of Finance to get us started on the presentations that will cover what the board will be considering for adoption this evening. Because this is a formal public hearing, we ask that members of the public refrain from asking questions during the presentation, as there will be an opportunity following staff's presentations. So Mr. Wunderlich, our Director of Finance, will take it from here.
All right, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. And I'll ask, thank you, Ms. Marcoux, who's shared the presentation. I will be joined in the presentation this evening by Sydney Alm, our Financial Analysis Supervisor. All right, let's go to the next slide. So we're going to cover a number of topics. Essentially, I will be covering some of the process we've gone through to get to this point. And then Mr. Alm will cover our financial plan as well as the details of the proposed rates and charges. And then I will cover the end part and the staff recommendations. Go to the next slide. So our rate setting process really started in May 2021 with 2 budget workshops. And then we continued to have workshops in August, September, and October to continue to review proposed rates and rate structures, update our spending forecasts, and analyzing our water demands. And then ultimately, we developed a final proposal that was presented to the board in December, and the board authorized the issuance of a Proposition 218 notice, which staff then sent out in late December, as Mr. Stevenson previously covered. And what's really in front of the board this evening is approval of the rates and charges that were in that Proposition 218 notice that does set the limits or parameters on what the board may consider. And there is no, and just for everyone's benefit, it's the rates that were included there. There are no future increases or adjustments that were proposed in that notice, just the specific proposal for right now. And so to do anything beyond what was included in that notice would require a future process of the board and a subsequent Proposition 218 notice. So let's go ahead to the next slide. And so that was sent out. So we're here tonight for the public hearing that was included in that 218 notice. And this essentially summarizes some of what Mr. Stevenson previously said in terms of some of the outreach that's been conducted. So let's go ahead and advance to the next slide. All right, so there are a number of factors putting pressure on rates. Now, obviously, one of those factors is our union contracts, which were negotiated last calendar year that provide for cost of living increases. We understand inflation is a major issue in the broader economy right now, and that certainly is a factor in negotiating wages with our represented members. We have a number of capital projects that fund significant water supply and quality initiatives, including we're part of a number of regional agencies working on an expansion to Los Vaqueros Reservoir. Similarly, as part of the State Water Project, Delta Conveyance. PFAS is a contaminant of emerging concern, and we're looking at treatment options for that, as well as a number of other capital projects. We're also looking at increasing costs for water purchases from the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, which provides a significant amount of the district's water supply, about 20%. And of course, for those who are able to be on our meeting at 5:30, where we talked about refunding some additional debt, we do need to maintain revenues to have robust debt coverage and maintain our bond rating, which allows us to, in the long run, save money on borrowing. Next slide. And so here are just some of the specific projects funded by rate dollars. We've got the advanced metering infrastructure, which, while long-term, we expect to provide operational savings and be a net financial benefit to the district, there are upfront costs. There's the Los Vaqueros Reservoir expansion project, which will provide us with additional access to water supplies when the delta is in surplus conditions, as well as additional local storage that will support our water operations. And of course, we do spend a fair bit of money on upgrading and renewing our pipes that are underground here in the Tri-City communities. Next slide. All right, so what are we doing to be efficient and try to mitigate the need for rate increases? We have a number of water sources, and of course, we always try to maximize water from the lowest cost sources. I referenced the AMI project, which while there is upfront cost long-term, we expect it to be a financial benefit for the district. Increasing our energy efficiency, as well as we're engaged in a solar project to reduce our overall electricity costs. We're partnering with other agencies to try to reduce costs and community impacts. For example, if a local city is doing a street repair or similar type of project, and it's about time to replace the main water pipe that's in that area, we would work jointly with the city to try to reduce the cost for both entities with that type of a project. And we also participate with a number of regional agencies to team together to maximize our purchasing power to lower costs for chemicals that we all need in water treatment. Next slide. We've also been putting a lot of effort in recent years into finding other funding options as much as we can to reduce the burden on our ratepayers. Over the last 3 years, we've received about $21 million in grants and reimbursements for mandated projects in Alameda Creek. And we're estimating that we'll get another $17 million between this year and the next couple of years for a variety of capital projects. And we continue to pursue all the funding options we can from grants. And of course, we're also looking at using some debt to offset the near-term impact of AMI. And so to spread those costs out over time, similar to how the benefits will be realized over time. Next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Alm, who will walk us through the financial plan as well as the specific details of the rates proposal before the board this evening. Mr. Alm, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wunderlich. Good evening, members of the board, members of the public and staff. As Mr. Wunderlich said, I will get into more of the specific. I will review the financial plan, the proposed rates and charges, miscellaneous fees and charges, provide just a quick update on the drought, and go over the proposed stage rates. So we'll start with the current assumptions that's in our financial planning model. So we've updated the model to reflect the latest information that we have. I will highlight some key assumptions as shown on this slide and the next one. Labor costs includes the latest union contracts approved by the board through 2024. That's 3.25% cost of living increase each year in 2022 and 2023, and 3.14% increase in 2024. The district continues to make voluntary payments for pension and retiree health benefits liability at the level approved by the board to achieve full funding by 2032. The financial plans includes the current CIP, that's capital improvement program, as approved by the board, and we added an estimated $15 million for PFAS treatment. The plan assumes $19.5 million in the state revolving fund loan to fund about 50% of the AMI project cost. Next slide, please. We also updated the bill demand projections with the assumption that the drought continues. And we assume that the drought condition will end June 30, 2023. Accordingly, we updated the water purchase cost and updated to reflect the expected water supply, availability from the state, and also the newly anticipated rate increase from San Francisco Public Utility Commission. They inform us that the projected rate increase is going to be 16.3% effective July 1, 2022. Previously in the plan, we anticipated an increase of 5.4%. We updated the dedicated fire service line rates based on the cost of service study. The financial plan includes the proposed water rate increase. That's a 6% increase to the fixed revenue effective March 1st of 2022, and an annual 3% uniform rate increase in the out years. And finally, the financial plan assumes board approval of the water shortage emergency stage rates at the stage 2A rate with the implementation date effective March 1, 2022 through June 30, 2023. Right, please. So the next several slides will show the metrics from our financial planning model with all the assumption that I just outlined. This first two, the first one up top shows the general fund ending balances. We're projecting the ending balances to be about $17.5 million below the reserve target in fiscal year ending 2027. The bottom chart shows the debt coverage ratios, which includes the estimated debt payment for the SRF loan. The coverage ratios are well over 400% in fiscal year ending 2027. Next slide, please. These two charts, the top chart on this slide shows the projected bill demands that I mentioned earlier. As you can see, we're assuming drought conditions to last through fiscal year ending 2023 with a rebound starting in fiscal year ending 2024. And the bottom chart shows the approved capital improvement program by funding sources, plus an estimated $15 million for PFAS treatment. So these two metrics compare operating revenue to operating expenses, that's the top one, and rate and charge revenue to revenue requirement. The top chart shows that operating revenues are sufficient to cover operating expenses over the next 2 fiscal years, that's the adopted budget years. But the district will need to rely on non-operating revenues to cover its operating expenses in the out years. The bottom chart shows that the rate and charge revenues are not sufficient to meet revenue requirement plus pay for the general fund capital projects. So again, the district does rely on other funding sources such as property taxes, grants and reimbursement, and interest income to fill the funding gap. As Mr. Wonderlich mentioned earlier, the district did a real good job in getting grants from different granting entities to help fund our capital programs. So as I mentioned earlier, the current financial planning model assumes a $19.5 million in state revolving fund loan to help finance AMI projects. So we wanted to show an alternative scenario that includes an additional $10 million in debt issuance for the project for a total debt financing amount of $29.5 million. With this scenario, the general fund ending balances would improve to about $10 million below the target, and the debt coverage remains about over 400%. The district is intentionally conservative when it comes to our financial planning, and the actual results at the end of the fiscal year may exceed projection. We've seen that in the last fiscal year. However, if the result do not exceed expectations or projections, then we could consider additional bond funding for capital program in 2025, concurrent with the refunding of the district's 2015 revenue bonds. So here's the graphic showing the result of the alternative scenario that I just mentioned. The general fund balance would improve to about 10 million below the reserve target, and the debt coverage ratios remain over 400% in fiscal year ending 2027. So this slide shows the current fiscal year 2021-2022 adopted budget for the general fund. We're showing this by program with labor component broken out for each of the program. I just wanted to highlight 3 big pieces of the pie. Operations and maintenance make up 29% of the total. This program, as you know, is more labor intensive. As shown there, 19% of the program is labor. On the other hand, look at source of supply, makes up 20% of the total budget, but most of the costs, 23% of the 27%, are for water purchases. Capital projects make up 23% of the total. And overall labor costs, add that all up, makes up to about 34% of the total budget. Next slide, please. So where's the money going? So we're proposing the rate increase. Where's it going? So this slide show the different program that the additional revenue would go to. So the proposed rate increase would generate about $2.3 million in annual revenue to the district. About 39% of that would go toward employee labor and benefits, 26% allocated to capital projects, and a big piece of the additional revenue, 23%, go towards water purchases, with the remaining 12% allocated to the general operation and maintenance. So I will now get into the more specific of the proposed water rates. Next slide, please. So first, there is no increase proposed to the baseline water consumption charge. That remains the same. Increases are proposed to the bi-monthly service charges, which vary based on the size of the water meter, as you can see in the chart there. Most customers have a 5/8 or 3/4-inch meters. And the proposed increase would, for those customers, is $2.33 bi-monthly, which is about $1.17 per month. As you can see, bigger increases are proposed for larger size meter. Again, all of these rates are based on the cost of service study, and the detailed report is available on the district's website. Next slide, please.
Okay, so let's get started. I just wanted to.
We're also proposing a revision to the private fire service rates. The proposed charges, as you see here, are based on water capacity that supports dedicated fire services. Again, the method of calculating these rates is described more fully in the cost of service study, as I mentioned, which is available on the district's website.
So keep an eye out for this because the price point is really minimal.
Excuse me, someone has a microphone open. If everyone could mute their microphones, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, President Weed. This slide shows the customer impacts of the proposed rates. Back to the previous slide, Ms. Cool. Could you? Yes, thank you. So this shows the customer impact of the proposed rates. This chart broken out by single family residential represented by the blue bar, and all other customers represented by the red or purple bar there. The vast majority of our single family residential customers, 96% of them, have either a 5/8 inch or a 3/4-inch meter. So they will see a very modest increase between $0 and $5. There are approximately 4% of the single family residential customers who have a 1-inch meter. And those customers would see their bill go up about $7, as shown in the previous slide. For all other types of customers, including apartment buildings, commercial and industrial customers who tend to have larger meter sizes because they need more capacity, these customers do pay larger fixed charges. So they will see larger increases with the rate proposal. But about 43% of them will see an increase of between $0 and $5. This slide shows how our rates compare to other agencies in the region. We do this every year. We compare ourselves against other 30 water suppliers in the region. The current bill for a typical customer that uses 16 units of water is $130.15. This includes the fixed service charge component and the commodity charge. As you see there, we're the 5th lowest compared to all the agencies that we surveyed. With the proposed rate increase, that bill would go up to $132.48. Still very well below the median bill there of $157.10. What this chart also shows on the left side of each of the horizontal bar, the dark blue shade there, represent how much of the bill is the service charge. So our service charge is at the median of the surveyed agencies. Next slide, please. So I just like to provide just a quick update on the drought. The state continues to be in a severe drought condition, and the state's water storage levels remain low. Our imported water supplies are limited. We receive a 15% allocation from the state water projects, and the SFPUC is under a water shortage emergency with a 10% reduction goal. Our local conditions remain dry, and accordingly, the district did declare a water shortage emergency with a target to achieve 15% system-wide reduction in water demands. We have a lot more information on the drought and rebates on the district website for those who are interested in learning more about it. Slide, please. I'll just go over the stage rate proposal and just provide a brief overview of the stage rates. As I said, the district did declare water shortage emergency and proposed the implementation of a stage 2 rate of 78 0.7 cents per billion unit. Stage rates are commonly called drought surcharge. The way the stage rates work is that they are an additional charge added on to water bills during a water shortage emergency. Typically, there's a schedule of stage rates based on severity of the drought. The more severe the drought is, the higher the rate. In our case, the term stage refers to the different stages of the district's water shortage contingency plan. The proposed stage rates are designed to fully offset the net revenue loss as a result of lower water sales. We do account for the savings we would expect from purchasing lower supply of water. So that's factored into the calculation. Just as the proposed increase to the bi-monthly service charge, the implementation of stage rates is contingent on board approval. Slide, please. So this slide shows the stage rates for different stages. These were included in the Proposition 282 notice to our customers. The proposed stage rate is highlighted in yellow there, a stage 2A rate of 78.7 cents per unit of consumption. Next slide, please. So this slide shows how the proposed stage rates would work and how they would impact customer bills. So the proposed stage rates are set up as a charge on each unit of consumption. That's the way ours is set up. So if you use more, you pay more. And as you use less, you pay less. The chart here shows how it works with a 15% conservation target for a typical single-family residential customer. So on the left column there shows the current bill as it is today, adding up to $130.15. The column next to that shows the bill under the proposed baseline that includes the additional $2.33 on the fixed service charge for a 3/4 inch or a 5/8 inch meter, typical customer. The third column shows what your bill is if the stage rate is implemented and your consumption stays the same. In this case, you would see your bill increase by $12.59. Now, on the far right column, it shows that if you're able to reduce consumption by 15%, your total bill stays about the same. Now, we do recognize that we have many customers in our serviced area who are very water thrifty already, and they're unable to conserve an additional 15%. And certainly not every customer would be able to conserve 50%. So those customers would see an increase in the water bill. Okay, now I will get into additional proposal called the miscellaneous fees and charges. Annually, staff reviews the other what we call miscellaneous fees and charges that are in our rate and fee schedule to determine the appropriate fees and charges required to cover the cost. As a result of the review, we're proposing additional revisions to the rate and fee schedule. Here are the proposed changes on this slide. Really the changes is because of the increase in the material costs. That's the big reason for either the increases or the decreases of the cost. For meter installation, you see some like a 3/4 inch meter is proposed to go up, but the larger meter size, the 1 inch and a 1.5 proposed to decrease. Again, it's because of the cost of material. All of the fees are effective March 1, except the meter installation charges, which are effective May 1. Slide, please. So in February 2019, as you recall, the board approved the update to the facility connection charges with the equity buy-in component added to the FCC. The equity buy-in is phased in over 5 years, so we're in year number 4 now of the phased-in schedule, and it's scheduled to go into effect May 1, 2022, with an inflationary increase of 6.617%. The annual inflationary adjustments were authorized by the board in 2019. The district annual developer letter, as mentioned earlier, which was mailed early in January, I believe January 7, included the notice of updated FCCs as shown on this slide. Okay, now I would like to turn it over, back it over to Mr. Wonderlich. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Au. So there are a few other changes in the proposal this evening that relate to miscellaneous fees and charges. One is our conservation rebate programs are included in that rate and fee schedule and has been previously reviewed with the board. Our water efficient landscape rebate program is transitioning to management by the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency. We currently have a policy that requires a property owner to be responsible for the bill after 3 defaults at a location. Staff is recommending that we change that to being after a single default. That will greatly increase kind of the administrative efficiency and collections efforts as it relates to those accounts. We also currently have what we call a field charge, which is primarily assessed when a new account is established for the cost of the district employee to go out and read the meter so that we can begin billing accurately. With the advent of the AMI program and more AMI meters going into the ground, we are recommending that we separate the account establishment charge from a separate generic field charge, because now as we get more and more AMI meters, we will not need to send a district representative into the field to physically or manually read the meter when there's a change in account holder at a location. But there's no change to the current fees that's proposed. And then, as was discussed or reviewed last month with the board, we are proposing for your consideration a $5 increase to the Help on Tap benefit, as well as extending the enrollment period from 2 years to 3 years. As we surveyed other agency programs, the longest example we could find of enrollment was a 3-year period. And so we're proposing to match that longest period by going from 2 years to 3 years. All right, so customers who are interested in saving money, obviously one way is the Help on Tap program that I just referenced. However, that is only for income qualified customers. To qualify, your income would need to be below 50% of the area median income or 250% of the federal poverty level. And anyone interested in learning more about that program can visit acwd.org/hot for more information about the program, including to download an application. And then, of course, one way to reduce your bill amount is to conserve water. And so we encourage everyone to go and check out the information at our drought page at acwd.org/drought for more information about conservation programs and tips. Okay, so updates on protest procedures and status. Protests could be mailed to the district or submitted online, and 1 protest per parcel can be counted toward calculating a majority protest. If there is a majority protest, then the board is precluded from moving forward with consideration of the water rates. It would require approximately 42,980 protests to meet that majority protest threshold. As of noon on February 7th, we had received 76 protests, and as of right now, we have received 80 protests. On the online protest form, we did ask customers to identify the primary reason for their protest, and based on the additional protests received since February 7th, 71% identified the proposed service charge increase, 21% identified the stage rates, and 8% selected other as the reason for their protest. All right, and then next slide. And so the staff recommendations for this evening are 1, to conduct the public hearing, which we're currently in the process of doing, and we'll soon receive the public comments. And then the second staff recommendation is by motion, adopt resolutions approving revisions to water-related rates and various other fees and charges, and amending the district's rate and fee schedule accordingly and determining that the amendments are exempt from CEQA, including specific resolutions to 1, revise general water rates and charges and private fire service rates, 2, to implement water shortage emergency stage rates, and 3, to update miscellaneous fees and charges, the customer assistance program, and facilities connection charges. And so those are the staff recommendations. And with that, that concludes staff's presentation for this evening.
President Weed, I think you're muted at the moment.
We're at going on 7 o'clock. If there's anyone who wishes to take, if there's any desire on part of the members of the board to take a break or staff, let me know and we can accommodate that. Not, let me then ask the board if they request any clarifications on the presentation we just had. I see none. A clarification I would ask for is the item that we're being asked for, or asked to take a motion on this evening, is a 1-year Proposition 218. If we were to change the base rate, so it's good through early next year. Following that, if we wished to do another change, we'd have to go through another Proposition 218 notice.
Yeah, that's correct. So the proposal this evening does not include a schedule of future revisions. It's only what has been presented this evening. And if approved by the board, these rates and charges will remain in effect until changed by the board.
And the staged rate provisions will remain in effect until changed.
That's right. There is no end date associated with any of the proposals this evening.
Thank you.
However, I would just add, just for the public's benefit, that the water shortage emergency stage rates that are being discussed this evening only apply during a declared water shortage emergency. And so the rate schedule would include said stage rates, until changed. However, the rates would only apply if implemented by the board during a water shortage emergency.
Okay, thank you.
President Weed, can I have a clarification question for General Manager? So, Mr. Stevenson, just to make it clear, if the board adopt the stage rate, and since we have already declared a water shortage emergency, would the stage rate automatically kick in, or will it require a separate board action?
Well, the board has flexibility there. The resolutions as drafted would implement the water shortage emergency stage rate, but the board's not required to implement it now.
So how would it be triggered? Will it require a separate board action?
Well, as drafted currently, the resolution does implement, but the board could elect not to implement. And we can get into that further, maybe following public comment, because this really is the portion of the public hearing where we would receive public comment.
Okay.
And President Weed, I can kick us off there if you'd like.
Please, I think with no other requests for clarifications on the presentation, Mr. Stevenson, if you would proceed with the public comments portion.
Okay, it's just a quick reminder that if folks would like to make public comments, now's your time, and you would do so by raising your hand in the Zoom app, or submitting your comments or questions in the chat feature in Zoom, or by speaking up verbally when invited to do that. And I'll just ask the district secretary to ensure that folks aren't prohibited from unmuting themselves. And at this point, I would turn it over to you, President Weed, to go through those folks who are raising their hands or indicating they'd like to speak.
At this time, I see one hand raised, which is Monica Aschbacher. Pardon the pronunciation. Please.
Yes, thank you. So I received a notification 218, I believe, a couple of weeks ago, and let me just tell a story. So I didn't even have to open the letter. I already knew that there would be an increase of the service charge and a very modest increase of the per unit charge. And when I then opened the letter and I made a comment to my husband, said, look, that's what's going to be in this letter, right? An increase of the service charge and then a modest increase of the per unit charge. And he said, well, how do you know? And I said, well, I know based on experience, based on what happened in the past. So I opened the letter and sure enough, there is an increase of the service charge and quite a modest increase because we are, as you mentioned, among those thrifty users. So not a lot of increase in usage charge, but we are in a drought, right? So why would you want to increase the service charge if it's so obvious that thrifty users, they get punished for being thrifty, and then other users who consume water and don't even think about it, they don't really get penalized for using more water. I think it might also be symbolic, right? I mean, if you want to change policy and change minds, then you would actually need to begin at some point that you have a vision of everybody using less water. Even being thrifty users, and we use about 6 units per billing period. So I understand that this is not a lot. So I think if you want to really make people aware, then don't increase the service charge, increase the consumption charge, right? So the more people consume, the more they pay. And you can keep everything else, right? Of course, income-based, that's fine. To help with that, you could actually think about making those units smaller, right? I mean, 1 unit is a heck of a lot of water, 748 gallons of water, right? And so if you made those units smaller, then, and you would not do 748 gallons, but you make it simple, it could be like 500 gallons, whatever you want it to be, but a simple number so people can calculate stuff, then you would actually be in a position to charge a little bit more per unit, but now because you have smaller units, it would actually increase your income. So my question and my plea for you is to, I guess you already ran all those models, but I would think that you should probably play a little bit more with those numbers, run different scenarios and see what the outcome is, so you can actually compensate for the higher cost of living, high wages, higher operations cost, higher water cost, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Horvath. Are there other comments from the public? Yes, we have Bill. I don't have your last name on the website. So Bill, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name's Bill Prescott, and my concern is similar in that I feel that what you're proposing as a sort of a standard across the board increase is punitive, and it penalizes the people who are doing what you asked. And in the past, what we saw in the last drought, and I made a comment about this. I actually commented in a submission in the form, is that we were asked to save, and we did what was asked collectively. We reduced our usage, and what we were given in return was, hey, you did a great job. Thank you so much. We have fixed costs. Because we have fixed costs, you have to pay more. And I understand that, but I'm saying if consumption goes down, which is what you're asking, everybody has to tighten their belts. Everybody needs to figure out how to cover the cost. It's not just the consumers. And I think you have an opportunity here to go after the people who aren't following, who aren't saving, and penalize them. I mean, this is precisely what the public utility PG&E did when we had the crisis with Enron. They really penalized in different tiers the people who are really using a lot, instead of a simple, oh, we're just going to charge everybody, but a more tiered approach where if you use more, you pay more. If you use even more than that, you pay more. And if you use even more, then you're really heavily penalized. And look at that as a potential model, because it just seems really unfair to penalize the people who are doing what you asked. And while you said it's true, if you do save and you do what we asked, you pay about the same, but you're really paying more. And that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ken N, please.
I have, thank you. I have several comments regarding the material presented tonight. First, considering 3 or more items in one board action is wrong. These items are distinct and should be considered separately. Regarding the rate increase proposal under consideration tonight, I formally protest a proposed increase and have filed such protest using the district's website. My rationale to protest is as follows. Placing the entirety of the general rate increase on the fixed cost is wrong. Our rate structure should have some relation to the cost of providing the service as required by law. Unfortunately, the rate analysis provided is worthless, as by Raftellus' own admission during the rate workshops, the analysis is quote unquote adjusted to result in whatever outcome is desired by the board. Therefore, we must turn to common sense and observation. It is clear in my mind that the cost of providing incremental water is increasing. To wit, this board, by its own action, raised the groundwater replenishment rate by 3% in April 2021, and is likely to take similar action in April of this year. Although a notional cost, the value of the water is increasing. For technical reasons, water produced at the blending facility requires approximately equal parts of groundwater and SFPUC water, a ratio which has increased from historical values. The cost of SFPUC water is clearly increasing, 16.3% versus your own estimate of 5.4%, clearly placing increasing costs on the production of blended water. Costs for chemicals, power, and other consumables, which scale with production volume, are also increasing. Thus, the choice to allocate the entirety of the rate increase in the fixed service charge is nonsensical. Your own presentation tonight showed that 23% of the increased revenue would go directly to the purchase of water. This proposal, by the district's own analysis, disproportionately places the burden of the increase on the class of efficient water users. These are the exact same type of customers the district needs in order to meet the proposed DWR water efficiency standards. The proposed rate structure subsidizes water wasters while penalizing water conservers. This is absolutely the wrong message. I urge the board to reconsider how they allocate the general rate increase. As it stands, I object and formally protest the proposed rate increase. My ACWD account number is 404-87653. Regarding the emergency stage rate, I have 2 general comments. The proposed stage rates are revenue neutral with a 15% reduction in consumption. While it is too early to determine, there is a significant chance that the district customers will not meet that target, and the district will hence sell more water, resulting in excess revenue. This excess revenue, if it materializes, must not be the catalyst for profligate or wasteful spending in the future. The proposed stage rates should be structured with a 0 tier, that is, a set amount of water which would not be subject to the surcharge, so as not to penalize those who have heeded previous calls to conserve. As the DWR has set a per capita target of 42 gallons a day, that is a reasonable starting point. Lost revenue can be recouped by shifting the burden to those who use the most water and have not taken the steps to conserve despite multiple rounds of drought over the past few years. Lastly, I have no specific comments regarding help on tap, except that it is not a panacea for water affordability and should not be used as an excuse to ensure that water remains affordable for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Let's see, I See no other hands have been raised. So at this time, speak up if you wish to address the board on the rate increase. If not, we will close the public hearing and move back to the board for questions and discussion.
President Weed, there is a comment in the chat that I just want to point out, and I don't know if the district secretary has it, and we might be able to read it, because the key point at the end is when's the due date to submit a protest, and the due date is before the end of this public hearing. So
Right.
we
Let
need to
me,
clarify.
Yes, so if I may, I'm happy to record the name of the individual who made that chat and count that as a protest.
all right, let me read.
Okay, yes, then I need to state, how do I do that?
No, I have your name on the
Uh-huh.
Zoom, and I will just take that as sufficient for recording a protest.
Okay, thank you.
For those who are on the phone, let me read your comment that you posted in chat. I fully agree with what the previous speaker said. It's simple. If you want to incentivize people to save water, then don't increase the service charge, but the consumption charge. The more one consumes, the more one pays with the tiered system. To make up for lower income due to lower consumption, run the numbers to understand how much you need to change people and organizations that consume a lot. And then what is the due date to submit a protest? So there was a comment deadline from Ken N. The deadline is about 5 seconds. And finally, Bill, to everyone, what are the clear triggers for entering and exiting the stage rate period? This is an important part of the model. It seems unclear. So if the staff could answer questions that have been raised, that would be helpful, particularly the last one.
Yeah, so the triggers are the district being in a declared water shortage emergency. That is something that must occur, or can only occur at a properly noticed public hearing by board action. And then we could only, the district would be limited in assessing a stage rate based on the rate identified in the Prop 218 notice at each different stage of water shortage emergency. And so that's why the rate of 78.7 cents is presented for this evening, because that's consistent with the district's currently declared stage of water shortage emergency. And then should that water shortage emergency stage change, meaning get worse, then the district would have the ability to implement the new stage rate following 30 days following notification of all customers. If the district were to reduce the level of the drought severity or rescind the drought emergency declaration, then the stage rate would be reduced or rescinded effective immediately. So we would not have a 30-day noticing period for reductions or rescinding the stage rate.
Thank you. All right. Then let us now go to the board, see if the board has any questions on the presentations or response to the public communications.
President Weed, this is Director Sethi.
Please.
First, I would like a clarification from staff. Are we approving or postponing approval of separate resolutions here tonight?
So we have prepared it so it could all be taken in one action. However, we have prepared it as separate resolutions with an understanding that different board members may have different voting interests on different resolutions. And so it could certainly be taken as 3 different motions and actions for each resolution.
Mm-hmm. And those 3 would be 1 on the district rate and fee schedule for the increase in the fixed charge or service charge of 6% for 1 year and no increase in the commodity charge. That's resolution number 1. Is that correct?
Yes, it also includes the update to the private fire service rates.
Right, okay. And the second that we would consider, and I'm trying to ask the question so this is clear for the public too. The second would be for adopting the water shortage emergency stage rates.
That's correct.
And then the third resolution would be for all of the miscellaneous fees and charges.
Correct, along with the Help on Tap program update. But yeah, the third one is basically catches everything else.
Okay,
And the items on the third resolution are not a part of the Prop 218 notice. They're not subject to the 218 process, whereas the first two resolutions are a part of the Prop 218 process.
all right. I don't know whether other board members will concur with me, but I would certainly appreciate taking a separate vote on each of these 3 different resolutions.
If I could
I
call the
concur.
board on that process, is there any objection to separating these into 3 items?
I like 3.
I thought that was an excellent suggestion by Kenan, and is one I would also support.
Okay, I may come back and make some future comments, but I would like to inform the public that I took the time to read through every single protest letter of what came in and tried to digest different themes of what people were articulating. And I say this with no ill feelings toward anyone, but I feel like there's such a lack of understanding of what the water district does, and that a lot of the criticism comes from lack of education. And part of that is the responsibility of the water district to keep its community informed. But I will take the Mr. Prescott's letter that he sent to the board and just address a couple of things which are pertinent for tonight's meeting. One, when we adopted the stage rates during the last drought, we did that upon the governor declaring a state of emergency for the entire state of California. Within, I think it was just a couple of weeks of him declaring that the state emergency was over, we did in fact get rid of the staged rates, and the water bills did go down. They didn't stay the same, as is contended here. They did decrease after the stage rates were eliminated. And the added contention is that it appears that this windfall was used to build a new set of offices at Mission Boulevard and 680. That facility has been there for approximately 30 years. That is our only active surface water treatment plant in the district, where we process water coming in from Lake Del Valle in the Delta. So that's not a new office building. That is a water production facility, and a very important facility to serve most of Mid Fremont and South Fremont. And the other point I would like to make, and I've brought it up in previous meetings, is that we have very lengthy, detailed, usually 3-4 hours, sometimes longer, rate hearings. We had 5 this past year to go through all of our finances. We welcome the public every time. We promote these opportunities, and sometimes only 1, 2, 3 people show up. But then when we've concluded on the results after really hours and hours of analysis by the staff, consideration by the board, we don't take these things lightly. And when we do take action, it's usually been well thought through. And so I would encourage people in the future, attend the meetings where you can, and not just the ones on that tie in with rates, but on other aspects of your water district. It's part of being an educated citizen in the community. Lastly, our district was built to process up to, I think, 80, 90 million gallons of water a day. And years ago, decades ago, we were at that upper boundary. Our water customers have saved water continuously over the last 30 years. And it doesn't matter whether this district at the peak of the summer is processing through 50 million gallons a day, or in the middle of the winter, 25 million gallons a day. The fixed costs of the district are just about the same. You still have the same number of pipes that are breaking, the same number of infrastructure projects that are going on in the district that take years of planning to get to the stage where you have all the permits and coordination with other utilities and cities and other government agencies. And so those can't be put on hold. And so the fixed costs associated with processing 50 million gallons or 25 million is just about the same. What people are really paying for, and this is where I stand by increasing the service charge or fixed charge, is that we're really paying for the infrastructure that delivers the water. We're bringing in water from hundreds of miles away from Lake Oroville and Hetch Hetchy Reservoir. That's about 60% of our water supply in a typical year. And then you have 900 miles of pipeline in the system, right here in the Tri-City area. We are going through an aging out of a lot of that infrastructure that was paid for by previous generations through property taxes and their rates. And now, as we often say, it's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge all over again. You start at one end, and then by the time you're done, you're starting all over again. And here we are considering a roof replacement tonight on Alameda Reservoir. And we have to go through a series of upgrades to all of our local reservoirs in the community. These were built in the 50s through the 70s, most of them. And now they're aging out. And this is a very large capital cost for the district. That's what the fixed charge, the service charge, pays for. It's going toward the infrastructure. And the commodity charge is going for water, power, and chemicals. And you see San Francisco is surprisingly raising the rates 16.3%. Water and our chemicals have gone up during the last several years after the last recession. And we have power that's been going up, although we're trying to factor in what will be the largest solar installation of any government agency in the county of Alameda by the time we're done here over the next couple of years. So I want people to reflect upon the fact that the fixed charges of the water district, the infrastructure charges, the delivery of the water through the system, 24/7 fire protection to your home, and the value that that provides to your home, what that all means. That's what you're paying for. So with respect to all the comments that were made, I have thoughtfully taken in everything that folks have said. I do differ where I find the facts different, but thank you for participating in the meeting and expressing your thoughts, especially for those who gave us put in the time. And I can say a lot of people put in an hour of time probably to prepare their comments and submit them to the board. I, as a representative of the public, take these comments seriously, and I really appreciate hearing from the public. And in many cases, I have reached back to contact people that at least provided an email address. So thank you very much for participating in tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead.
Trustee Gunther, do you wish to speak next?
Yeah, I'll go ahead next. I think first thing, this is a 1-year Prop 218 notice, which means we're coming back again. And if I'm not mistaken, I have a question for staff, is when do we expect to have our next workshop on the next board increase or the next potential increase, which we're saying probably is going to be about 3%.
So we currently have scheduled for July, the first board workshop for the next rates process.
Okay, well, that's my first comment. Okay, for everybody who's listening, this process started not 1 year ago, but actually 2 years ago. We didn't do a rate increase 2 years ago, which has been lost on some of the, I also read all the protests. And I think that was lost on a couple of them. But the other thing about that was it's been a divided board. We've had very lively conversations. I'll use the term lively, conversations regarding this subject for like 2 years now. And in July, we are going to have more lively conversations. And for everybody who has commented, I suggest strongly that you start in July, because, you know, my position tonight has been developed over 2 years. I've read your comments, and my position going for the next rate increase will probably be slightly different. I do expect us to be looking at a 3% per what the staff has said, probably a multi-year Prop 218 notice the next time. So please get involved. It's very frustrating to go to the, you know, to attend these meetings for 2 years and have people then say, what are you doing? I will say 76 or 80 protests. It's not 6,000. And we've been there too. And I read all 6,000. But it's still the same. And I can tell you the demographics on this. These are not coming from people with tons of money. I get that. We're trying to help with our Help on Tap program. Hopefully that will assist some of our customers. Fixed rate, I sided with the 6% this time on the fixed rate. Ultimately, it came down to a 2% increase. The 6%, $1.50 a month, somewhere in there. I think we need to say that. I'd like to talk a little bit about stage rates at this point. I agree with Director Sethi. I think it needs to be, it's said that no, after we did the last drought, as soon as the governor declared the drought over, the drought emergency, we rescinded the rates, and we will do the same. We are in still a drought. I was hopeful after December, and yes, we're a little bit better off after December, but it hasn't rained in January at all. So that's not, and it's not on the horizon. That doesn't show well for us to say, no, we're not going to do staged rates. I think we have to. I wish I didn't think that way. And a couple of weeks ago, I didn't. But because it hasn't rained in January, I'm nervous. It's not as bad as what it said. Now, one problem, and this is something that I've asked staff to look into. If we did this on the service charge or the service commodity charge, the problem with that is then you impact large families and large families or extended families that live under the same roof. We need to address that. somehow. Water budgeting as a possibility. I'm looking for that in our next process. I'm satisfied where we are today. It's been 2 years. We've been working on this. And I agree, the message may be not quite, because we're on one hand saying we want you to conserve, but on the other hand, we're not targeting that rate. Well, that's the state's rate. Director Sethi's correct. The service charge does impact getting the water to you. There are differences between board members as to what that is, the percentage. That's for a future meeting. And that'll come up again in our budget workshops. So I strongly recommend that, please, for those who want to do this or want us to head that direction of putting it more towards a service charge, we're starting this process again, or excuse me, not the service charge, the commodity charge.
Right.
We're starting this process again in July. So please, I'm asking you to please attend the meetings. It makes it easier. I've already got all the comments from this year. I'm not going to forget those when we go into the next sessions. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
President Weed, if I may.
Ari, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I had a comment. Are we good to give comments, or is it still the question period?
I'm sorry?
I don't have any. I don't have any questions. Just a comment, if that's appropriate.
My comment would be appropriate.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to kind of piggyback on some of the comments made by directors Sethi and Gunther. First off, like was mentioned by both of the directors, and I think you'll hear this from all of the directors and from a lot of staff as well. I read through every comment that we got, every protest that we received. I received emails directly to me as well, which I did my best to respond to. And so I really appreciate the input from the community members, and anyone who knows me knows that I like to go out into the community and talk to people face to face any opportunity that I get, and I tried to do that during this process as well. And you know, with any rate proposal, you're going to have folks who, no matter what, they're going to be disappointed that we're considering raising rates, and then you're going to have other folks who are on the other side of the fence who understand the rationale behind it. So I think it's important for me to kind of set a little bit of context into my perspective on the proposal tonight, and then kind of explain from there. So if we look back to the last rate increase, I think that was in 2019. At that point, we had projected as a district that we would average about a 3% increase across the board on both the service and commodity charge for the outgoing years. I think we were looking at least out 10 years at that point. That was what we were projecting. Come to last year, when our last rate increase, or when we were set to discuss rates again, as a board, we made a pretty difficult decision, but one that I think all of us stood by to forgo raising rates. You know, that was something that was more of a reflection of where the economy was and the uncertainties that we were facing, not just as a district, but looking out to our customers and recognizing that this was a very tender moment, one where we didn't want to burden our customers with a rate increase, and we didn't think that was the right time. Luckily, we were able to make up for that, particularly through our commodity charges, and we were able to get to this point now where we're considering an increase this year, but we were able to kind of forego the increase last year. When we came to the board, or when staff came to the board originally this year, we were looking at a 3% increase. But as a board, we were able to find consensus to cap that at 2%. We were able to, go a percentage point down from what we had previously even committed to the community. And that was where we felt we could, as a board, comfortably sit. The question then became, okay, then how do you divide that between the service charge and the commodity charge? And that's really where I think there's probably quite a bit of difference amongst the directors, and clearly you hear that from members of the community as well. I originally came with the hope that we would increase both the service charge and the commodity charge by 2%. But I think it was more of a compromise position where we decided that given the fact that we're going to be implementing stage rates, and that's primarily on the commodity side, we want to make sure that we balance that with some revenue stability, and that's where I was able to be convinced to look at just looking at the service charge. Obviously, I think that's kind of we've heard quite a few of you mention that doesn't quite make sense. If you're talking about conservation and you want to impact somebody's behavior and you want them to use less water, then why wouldn't you look at the commodity charge? But from my perspective, even if you're to put all of that on the commodity charge, it's not a significant enough increase on the commodity charge to actually impact behavior. That's really what the stage rates are meant to do. That is sending a direct price signal to our customers that, look, the more water you use, you are going to face a pretty significant increase on each unit of water. And so I think we've approached that in at least what I think and what I consider to be a more thoughtful way. Of course, I don't expect that everybody is going to agree with me, and I think even dissenting opinions will emerge on the board, as well as I'm sure you'll hear from other directors. But that's kind of the approach that I was taking, and kind of the thoughts behind why I think this is a pretty reasonable increase. Again, like it was mentioned, this is about $1.17 a month for the average customer, for the average single family residential customer. If you look at where that money is going and the investments that we're making in infrastructure for the long term, that's a very, very good deal for our community. We're rolling out with AMI. We're well underway with our seismic retrofitting program. We're looking at the Los Vaqueros reservoir expansion program, and so many other things. We're going to be doing a ribbon cutting for our fish ladder project in just a few months. We are making a lot of investments for the long term to make sure that we are able to operate in a capitally efficient way, but also one in which we're balancing both revenue stability, but also all of the other maintenance requirements that we're going to have for the future. And so I would argue that I think we are operating in a pretty capitally efficient manner. I think this increase, of course, any increase will be generally received negatively, at least by those who speak up. The other thing that we always look for is to balance any rate increase with a increase to the Help on Tap program. That's something that we've been pretty consistent on since we implemented that Help on Tap program back in 2017. And tonight, again, you're going to see that not only are we going to use that increase on the Help on Tap program to make up for the average cost that each single family resident will see, but it's going to go beyond that. We're looking at increasing the bi-monthly bill credit to $5, which is about twice as much as what the expected bill impact would be for the average customer. So I think we're doing what we can to try and balance all of these different concerns that we have within the community. And of course, I'm going to be supporting tonight's proposal on the rate increase on the stage rates, as well as on the Help on Tap program. But I do really appreciate a lot of what was shared by our customers, both tonight and over the last few weeks, with all the emails and phone calls that we've received. I think I'll keep my comments there, but I hope I've kind of explained my position well.
Thank you. Now, Director Wong.
Thank you, President Wee. I guess I'll start out with some clarification statements. I think there's still some confusion amongst our customers on what exactly are we proposing tonight. So basically, we're looking at three different, for lack of a better description, buckets. The first one is to do miscellaneous rates and charges adjustment and to increase help on tap program amount. And the second bucket is actually a general rate increase where we're trying to recover the additional revenue needs through a fixed charge only increase. And the third item is the stage rate, which will only kick in when there's a drought water shortage emergency and will end when the water shortage emergency ends. I'm definitely in support of the Help on Tap program. I have no problem with that. I'm in support of the stage rate because it's a commodity-based rate that actually is consistent with our message of saving water. And in the drought, our cost to deliver a drop of water does increase, so it makes sense to me. Now here comes the lively discussion that's been happening at the last few board workshops, and this is not going to be new to my fellow board members or staff. I definitely object to recovering our general revenue requirement through fixed fee, our fixed charge increase only. By only increasing the fixed charge and not spreading the charge across the board is unfair. Staff presentation and some of our customers clearly point out that the additional revenue required crosses both fixed and variable costs. By loading everything on fixed costs, we are not equally dividing and charging it in the correct spot. Slide 19 of today's presentation clearly indicate that some of these additional revenue required is to cover water purchase. Secondly, by focusing everything, the general rate increase on fixed charges is unacceptable. It impacts our fixed and low income customers. We're taking away their ability to minimize their water bills by decreasing their water use or being more efficient. We talked about Help on Tap program could help them out. I just looked it up. The median Bay Area income is about 112K, a little bit over 112.5. 50% of that is less than 60K a year. You have to earn less than $60,000 in order to qualify for Help on Tap. $70,000 does not qualify for assistance. And you know what? It's pretty hard for a household to live with the 70K. So that program really does not help a large part of our fixed income and low income customers. Also, by focusing everything on fixed charge, we're unfairly penalize efficient water users, as clearly presented by staff in previous workshops. By increasing fixed charge only, our efficient water users actually have to pay more as compared to spreading the increase equally across both fixed and commodity charges. We're basically asking our efficient water users to bear a larger portion of burden to cover our revenue shortfall projections, right? And lastly, this really sends a wrong price signal to our customers. We're telling everybody they have to conserve water. But by increase just the fixed charge, we basically are telling them it doesn't matter how much water you use. We're going to increase your water rate. There is just something really wrong to me philosophically as a water district when we're trying to encourage water conservation on one hand, and on the other hand, we're telling them, hey, you know what? It doesn't matter. We're just going to increase your fixed charge. I have a problem with that. It's very obviously which way I would be voting. And lastly, I would just like to thank our customers for showing up and participating today. I know this is the same message you heard from other directors. I would just say personally, I really, really would appreciate our customers to participate and share their thoughts with us and follow along with us in this rate workshop, our rate discussion. It's a long and drawn out process. It does require time, but it would also help the directors understand our customers' point of view as we start developing our next rates. So I really look forward to seeing some of you at our future board meetings. Thank you, Director Weed, President Weed.
Thank you.
President Weed, Director Sethi. I would like to request that after you make your comments and before we go to a vote on these three different resolutions, that we take a courtesy break for everybody.
Fine.
We've been going almost 2.5 hours since our earlier meeting.
Yes, and I'll try and keep my comments succinct. Alameda County Water District, as seen by the overall chart compared to our neighbors, does an excellent job in keeping our total cost under control. And yet we're able to offer some very competitive salaries, probably the highest paid salaries of any retail water agency in California and therefore the country. And that's a positive thing. And we've managed our water supplies. So in the overall, we're fine. But the difficulty I have is that there is no correlation between our cost of service study and our rate structure. Our cost of service study shows that at most 1/3 of our costs are related to commodities and 2/3 are related to fixed charges. We're the reverse. The result is we have a widely unpredictable revenue structure. We have no idea what our revenues are going to be year to year, and it's difficult for us to do a reasonable budget. We're leveraged on the upside and the downside. That's why we need staged rates in order to make up, not for conservation, but to make up for lost revenue. The stage rates are triggered when we encounter a loss of revenue. During the good times, the last several years, we were putting up to $50 million a year in the bank, positive, surplus. Not to worry, we found ways to spend it. And some of it went into reserves. Now, when we go into a dip, we're going to have to charge more on the service charge. My position would be, and all of our discussions relate, and you're based on a dysfunctional rate structure to begin with, the arguments for incremental changes do not have a lot of credibility to me. I would cut the commodity cost in half and double the service charge. That would bring us in line with our cost of service. We could do more than a 1-year Prop 218 rate analysis. We could go out 4 years or 5 years. So we're there. About a year ago, last time we went to this, a couple of years ago, we were told that 95% of the rate increase was needed for service charge, for fixed cost, and 5% to buy additional water. We still kept that reverse ratio of 2/3 and 1/3. We were locked in. At one time, it was much worse. We were down to 91% commodity and 9% service charge. It made little sense. We're trying to bring it back. So the proposal to put the entirety of the net new rate increase, a marginal step in the right direction. There's an issue on helping the economic disadvantaged. Our rate structure has subsidized the individual resident. The people using larger commodities, the bigger meters, subsidized small residential meters. And that has been our history. Should we give more of a subsidy is the question. There may be 1,000 or so people of the 85,000 that could use some help. We've identified those in our Help on Tap program. If people need help, help them. But don't warp an entire rate structure to try and structure it so that a small percentage are assisted who might need assistance and leave you with the inability to do a budget and have any confidence in it. So on the tiered rates, on the rate surcharge, when we went through the last time in the last drought, we did have a 0 tier. I thought that was a good idea. I would hopefully we could do that again. It's not in our current proposal. And our 0 tier was for residential users, not commercial or industrial. And we have to be clear to tell the people what we're using the money for. We did a rate surcharge in the last drought. We raised $12.4 million. We told them it was to purchase more expensive San Francisco water. Not $1 of that went for purchasing San Francisco water. San Francisco water removed their minimum purchases and we actually purchased less. It was needed to cover to feed the staff and maintain our facilities. So until you have a rational rate structure, we go off on all these tangents. We hear the arguments and they're well-meaning and they're well-based, but we're talking about a dysfunctional rate structure. Hopefully we'll be able to address it. It may be addressed through adjudication, and hopefully it's not our district that is adjudicated. So those are my thoughts, and we'll be taking the votes following a break. Is there any final comment before we go to a break? All right. Will 10 minutes work for the board and coming back at 8 o'clock?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. It's 8 o'clock. We are now back in session. So to turn it to Mr. Stevenson for the next step and then let him refer to the attorney if he wishes.
Yes, thank you, President Wade. So thanks for the very good discussion by the board. And again, thanks especially to our customers and the public for providing some very good input this evening. Based upon the discussion amongst the board, it sounds appropriate. Well, first of all, I think President Weed, you might want to declare the public hearing closed.
All right.
At which time we can start a process of moving through the board's direction on these items.
I thought I had done that before we sent it back to the board, but I will do it again. The public hearing on the rate increase is now formally closed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, President Weed. So we actually have three sort of, as was pointed out during the discussion, we have three areas within staff's recommendations that the board sounds like they'd like to take up individually. And so I'd like to turn it over to our general counsel, Mr. Pat Miyake, to kind of lay out the process for how that could work with the board.
Sure, thank you. So I will refer to our staff report, which has a very long recommendation. And it had two items. The first was to conduct the public hearing and to accept all the public comments, which we've done and now is closed. And item two has three resolutions that the board will consider. And they're broken down into, why don't I just read them one at a time? And I'll do it in reverse order from the staff report, because I think that that's how it was actually, I'll actually go B, C, and then A, because that's how the discussion went through. And so the first motion would be to, by motion, adopt the resolution amending the rate and fee schedule that implements the recommended amendments to the district's water-related rates and charges, including service charges, private fire service rates, and outside district commodity rates. And that there's a corresponding resolution that goes with that. And so if you wanted to take that up first, I will stop there. And then there will be two other resolutions that we will take action or consider taking action on.
All right, fine. And let us take the first recommendation on the associated rates and costs.
I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. Do we have any comment on this?
Clarification question,
Please.
just to make it clear for our customers, this is the item related to the general rate increase, correct?
Correct. This is the increase to the service charge, the private, which is the fixed charge, the private fire service charge, and there is a slight increase in the outside district commodity charge.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is a 6% increase in the service charge is what we're voting on?
Yes, that's the primary feature of this. Yes.
Thank you. So We have a motion. We have a second. Roll call, please.
Director Sethi,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
No,
and Weed.
Aye, although it is a very modest step in the correct direction. Thank you.
Okay, so the second motion would be to adopt a resolution amending the rate and fee schedule to add the recommended water shortage emergency stage rates and implement the stage A rate based on achieving a 15% system-wide conservation. This is the stage rate addition to the rate and fee schedule, as well as implementing the stage 2A rate.
I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll second that and note that this would go into effect immediately, right? Not March 1?
It's scheduled to go into effect March 1.
Oh, March 1, okay. So I second.
Clarification question on this. When you say based on a 15%, that is the with the assumption that we would receive a 15% conservation.
That's correct. It's calculated based on that. If conservation exceeds 15%, then we would fall short of the revenue target. If conservation is more or is less than 15%, then revenue would exceed the target.
Okay, would we trigger this even though we have not achieved 15% conservation?
Yes, so the forecast is that implementation of this rate along with the other restrictions that have been put into place during the current water shortage emergency would achieve the 15% conservation. Obviously, actual results will always vary somewhat from projections, and then we would make updates in the future based on our actual results.
So this is based on the assumption that we're going to achieve that reduction in income. All right,
correct.
Thanks.
I have a question regarding this. If we were to, okay, so if we're gonna impose this tonight, then it will take place in March. If by chance we get lucky and it rains heavily in March, but you know, we're still probably going to be pretty darn close to a drought. Let's say the governor says, look, we want a 5 or a 10%. Can we lower this in March to the stage, I think it was stage 1, which was 10%?
Yeah, so the board is limited to impose a rate that is no more than what is associated with the declared water shortage emergency. There's always flexibility to do something less. And so we could take this action tonight. And if we get a March miracle and we get amazing precipitation and additional snowpack and the drought ends, then we could rescind it at that point.
Okay. All right. I'm okay with putting it in effect tonight, understanding that hopefully, I was hoping we wouldn't have to do this based on, you know, December, but it looked like December has turned into January where we got nothing. So, okay, I'm good.
Well, I would like to note something before we go to a vote. That in our drought presentation, I think that's coming up, there is a slide comparing water consumption for different years, and for November, December, January, we came down quite a bit, and I believe that we either hit the 15% target or exceeded it slightly. And then number 2, from the Finance Committee, if we look at where our revenues are against what we were forecasting, we're already below on that revenue front as well. So why don't we take a vote?
We have a motion and a second on this that have been made. All right.
Director,
Roll call, please.
Director Sethi,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
All right.
Huang,
aye.
and Weed.
No. Based on the fact that we have such a dysfunctional rate structure, and this is a creature of that. So, thank you.
Okay, and the third motion would be by motion, adopt a resolution amending the rate and fee schedule to implement the recommended amendments to the district's miscellaneous fees and charges and help on tap customer assistance program and reflect previously approved adjustments to the facility connection charges with the inflationary update and continued phase-in of the equity buy-in component.
I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Director Sethi,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Thank you. You're muted, Judy.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Aye.
and Weed.
Aye.
So those are the three resolutions that I believe conclude item 5.6.
All right. Thank you. It's less traumatic than last time. For the last several times. So next we go on to the next item on our agenda, which if I can pull it up.
Yes, President, we.
Item 5.7, resolution replacing the nomination of a member of the Alameda County Water District Board of Directors as a member of the Association of California Water Agencies Region 5 Board for the term 2022-23. Please.
Yes, thank you, President Weed. And this item has to do with filling this board vacancy. This board vacancy exists on the ACWA, or Association of California Water Agencies Region 5 Board. And ACWA has invited its member agencies within Region 5, including ACWD, to submit nominations for appointment to the ACWA Region 5 Board. So in consultation with President Weed, I placed this item on the ACWD board meeting agenda to allow the board to discuss and select a nominee from the ACWD board as our board feels appropriate. So staff's recommendation is: 1, discuss interest in nominating a member of the Alameda County Water District Board of Directors for appointment as a member of the Association of California Water Agencies Region 5 Board. And 2, adopt a resolution placing in nomination a member of the ACWD Board of Directors as a member of the ACWA Board, Region 5, for the 2022-23 term as appropriate.
Thank you. Open up for discussion. Does anyone feel that we should not have a member on this Region 5 board? If not, is there anyone who would have an interest in serving on this board? I served on it for almost 20 years and would be interested in serving again if there's no other party that wishes to have that wonderful experience.
Not at this time, but I will support your service.
I will second that nomination.
And I'd be happy to support Director Weed for that nomination.
Thank you very much.
Same here.
So do we need a motion for this?
Yes, you do. And there's actually a resolution that goes with this. It's in your agenda packet. And what we would do is we'd fill in the blanks with Director John Weed. And then the appropriate motion would be to adopt the resolution placing a nomination, Director John Weed of the Alameda County Water District Board of Directors as a member of the Association of California Water Agencies Region 5 Board for the 2022 through 2023 term.
And this is not one of those positions that requires several other districts to make a nomination?
You mean to support?
Support the...
No, each interested agency would submit their nomination, and then the Region 5 board would select from those nominations.
All right. Okay. Call for the question. Roll call, please.
Somebody needs to make the motion. Somebody needs to second it.
I'm sorry.
I'll make the motion that we push forward Director Weed for this position.
Thank you. Good catch, Pat.
I'll
And I'd
second.
be happy.
Oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
Roll call, please.
Sethi,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
and Weed.
Aye. Short comment. When I served on this, shortly after I was elected to the board, and they asked me if I'd be interested. I said, well, yes. And I said, well, what's the competition? They said, well, none. We've been looking for someone to volunteer. In recent years, they've had a number of applicants applying for the position, and that's been a very positive thing and a healthy sign for the district. Region 5 is the only one of the 10 districts that require that you be an elected or senior appointed commissioner to serve on the board. The others have a number of staff people who seem to, and there's no term limits. So there have been some staff people that have stayed on in the other districts for extended periods of time. Thank you.
Reed, congratulations on your reappointment, and I have tremendous confidence you'll represent us well.
Thank you.
Well, he still has to be
Nomination.
Appointed, no, and it's we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Thank
so
you. Then move on to the delivery of groundwater monitoring report and survey report, adoption of the resolutions relating to the Replenishment Assessment Act.
Thank you, President Wee. And for this item, I'll turn it over to our Director of Water Resources, Ms. Laura Heides.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. As required by the Replenishment Assessment Act of the Alameda County Water District, the district must prepare an engineering survey report on groundwater conditions, also known as the survey report, and the board must adopt the necessary resolutions of intent on or before the second Tuesday of March as prerequisites to a public hearing, which must be held on the second Tuesday of April. The purpose of the public hearing is to allow public comment on both the survey report and the proposed replenishment assessment rate. The survey report includes a recommendation for a 2.6% increase in the replenishment assessment rate for groundwater pumped or extracted for other than agricultural and municipal recreational purposes effective on July 1, 2022. This proposed increase is subject to public notification requirements that were established through Proposition 218. This recommendation is based on projected activities needed to sustain the groundwater basin in fiscal year 2022-23, with consideration of groundwater levels and quality documented in the 2021 groundwater monitoring report. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this year's survey report and the groundwater monitoring report were included in the board agenda packet, and hard copies of the reports have been provided in each of the board members' inboxes at the district's headquarters. The reports were also made available on the district's website on February 8th. Approval of this item is consistent with Strategic Plan Goal 2.1, maintain and enhance sustainability and reliability of local and regional water supplies, and Strategic Plan Goal 3, improve the district's financial stability and transparency. So tonight's recommendation is to receive the 2021 groundwater monitoring report and the survey report on groundwater conditions, February 2022, and by motion, 1, adopt a resolution declaring the board's intention to continue use of replenishment assessment revenue to fund a portion of groundwater basin costs in 2022-23, setting April 12th, 2022 at 6:00 p.m. as the date and time for a public hearing for consideration of the proposed increase to the replenishment assessment, and directing staff to mail to owners and operators of wells that would be subject to the replenishment assessment notification of the proposed increase and public hearing details. And 2, adopt a resolution extending the deadline for installation of measuring devices on certain non-metered wells. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have questions from anyone in the public? There being none, bring it to the board.
I do have a question. Why do we need to extend the deadline for installing metering devices?
Good question. So rather than, we do have one remaining well that is not metered, but the amount that we actually collect from it is much less than it would cost to actually meter that well. And so in order to keep that well out of that metering status, we do have to extend the resolution each year.
Thank you.
Sure.
I would like to ask one question, Ms. Heides. How many accounts are affected by what we're proposing?
You know what? I don't have the number of accounts in front of me, but about 93% of the water is from ourselves. And so it's our own wells that we're accounting for. So it's only about 7% of the water that's used by others. So and it's probably in the report somewhere that I'm not putting my fingers on right now, the number of actual wells that we've got. But hopefully that gives you a sense of what that looks like.
So pardon me here, but are we proposing a rate increase on ourselves?
So partially, yes, and we do, kind of credit ourselves back for that.
The ACWD is what, about 97% of this total revenues received?
It's about 93, actually.
Oh, okay.
It's around that.
Thank you.
Sure. And Director Sethi, if you'd like the exact number of accounts, I could pull that and get it to you in a bit. I just don't have it page marked at the moment.
Maybe in April when we consider it.
And Mr. Hallowell will be here to present next month.
Okay.
Are there any other comments? Okay, then do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Or do we need a motion on this? This is just to, we've had a delivery of it and we had a public hearing.
I believe we do.
You do need a motion to adopt the two resolutions that are in your agenda packet. And one of those resolutions actually calls the public hearing.
So do we wish to take those in sequence or can we take them as a group?
You can take them together if the board would like to do that.
Right, so we have a motion to adopt both resolutions.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please. Roll call. Oh, Gina, you're muted.
Director Sethi,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
and Weed.
Aye.
And President Weed, I forgot that I actually had a question on item 5.5, if I may ask that before you go to reports.
Please.
So I went through the very lengthy reports that were provided to the board. I thought it was really full of very interesting information. I don't know if the other board members spent time going through it, but it took me about 2 hours to get through those materials. But it was very interesting. I want to compliment the consulting firms that we worked with. And I saw the schedule for what we're planning to do from September of this year through September of next year. That's a pretty long work schedule in the middle of a neighborhood close to where I live. I hope it's not too disruptive for the residents there. But nowhere did I see the actual cost of the replacement. I know we've seen it in the past, but I really wanted to ask that question tonight and know what we're looking at.
Sure. If it's permissible, I think I can ask Mr. Awoke to respond to that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Director, Vice President Sethi, that's a good question. The document that's before the board or that just got approved by the board this evening is the environmental clearance, the CEQA document. We are in the process of developing the plans and specifications for the project. We are near 65% plans. We have opinions of probable cost, construction cost in the order of 14 to 16 million at this point, and those numbers will be refined as we finalize the plans and the specs.
Wow. I thought originally, and I'm thinking back a decade, we were thinking it might be 5 million. So to hear that it's tripled, wow.
Yeah, it partly is because of the cost of construction going up. As you can imagine, the price of materials, labor, equipment has gone up. But part of it is the requirements that we have to meet have become more stringent.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you at the entrance to the gate there, to Alameda Reservoir, is the home of our former mayor, Bob Wasserman, and his wife still lives there, and she's quite influential in the community. So I hope we are as least disruptive as possible.
Yeah, we will do everything we can to minimize impacts and disruptions. Construction projects are never a convenience for anyone, but we will certainly try and minimize those impacts.
Thank you. And thank you for the information.
Thank you.
And part of the cost surely is mitigations to try and minimize impacts.
All right, thank you. With that, we can now move on to the next item on our agenda, which is reports. We have the board committee reports. If anyone has a question or comment about the minutes of the board committee reports. There being none, we can then move on to operational reports. Is there anyone has a comment or question about any of the items in our operational reports? I open this to the public as well if they have access to our agenda.
President Weed, I see a hand up by Mr. Ken N.
Yes, Mr. Ken N.
Thank you, President Weed. I just wanted to comment on, as I normally do, on the water hardness map. I'm impressed by the progress you've made. I assume that you are running the desal plant at full tilt and pushing that relatively soft water as far as it goes. I would like to again commend the district for doing what it has done to reduce the water hardness throughout the entire district. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up comment, Mr. Nishimura. It's on the water production report. And from what I gathered, it didn't appear that we used any San Francisco water in January. And yet we were still within acceptable levels in terms of the softness or hardness of the water. What happened with San Francisco water?
I'll ask our Director of Operations and Maintenance to address that question.
Because in the last board meeting, we heard we had a necessary minimum usage of San Francisco to meet our PFAS goals. So I found it curious that it appeared we didn't use any San Francisco water.
Yes, Dr. Sethi and Mr. Stephen, thank you. I'm actually looking for that report because that does not sound correct as well.
Yeah, so it's the, are we talking about the very last page of the packet, the hardness map?
Yeah, yes, it's up in the upper left corner.
Yeah, so there's no unblended SFPUC, but SFPUC still would have been used at the blending facility to blend with groundwater.
Correct. Yes, Mr. Wunderlich is correct. That number that's listed under SFPUC, I was looking for the production report. In the hardness report, the number given for SFPUC is for the turnouts. Those are direct turnouts into our system. The blending facility numbers includes SFPUC water. So if you notice, it's gone, the hardness has gone up a little bit because SFPUC has gone up as well.
So where I see 0, that is just for the turnouts.
Yes, that's direct turnouts outside of the blending facility.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Director Sethi, if I may, it's on page 632 of your board packet, which outlines the actual breakdown of SFPUC, and it is slightly greater than the prediction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So that completes the operational reports. So you have a staff presentation on the drought updates to 6.3.
That's right. For item 6.3, our drought update, again, I'll turn it over to our Director of Water Resources, Ms. Laura Heides.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. And I'll just to close the loop on the earlier item, I did find that it's about 47 non-ACWD owned wells in our program and the replenishment assessment. So just wanted to close that loop there. And with that, I'm very pleased to have here tonight Mr. Leonard Ash, our water supply supervisor, to share the latest on the drought update. And we look forward to your questions on this as well. So Mr. Ash.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Heides. Tonight's drought presentation will provide high-level updates on drought-related topics as staff has been providing to the board for quite a number of months now. And I'll begin with a review of local precipitation, where we closed the books for January having received 0.12 inches of rainfall locally. And that brings the cumulative total to 11.40 inches that we received to date this water year, as shown by that green line. And as mentioned earlier in this meeting, no rainfall has fallen so far this February. The red line shows the average year rainfall, and the black line shows water year 2021 rainfall. And I'll draw your attention to the background shading behind that line work. That shows the distribution range for wet years in blue, average years in light green, and dry years with the tan shading. As we had a strong start to the water year with well over 100% of average rainfall for that early portion of the water year, we were in that blue range. But since we've had a dry January, the cumulative rainfall has fallen more into the average year distribution, that green shading. And while we're in the midst of our rainy season, but we continue to see no rainfall, we'll continue to move with below normal precipitation in our forecasts that are in the near term. So as a possible worst case, the board may recall an analog year of 2013 and how that played out. As we entered January 2013 with similar healthy level of local precipitation from the prior couple of months, but then we saw from January onward very dry conditions persist. So that precipitation line barely climbed from January into April, and we ended the rainy season below average. If we continue to see dry conditions into 2022, you can imagine that this green line might extend flat going forward. It is possible that we could end up moving towards a dry year locally. Next slide, please. For Northern Sierra precipitation, we see the same plateau due to recent dry conditions. This graph here is from February 2nd, but today DWR reports currently the same cumulative precipitation at 31.5 inches, which as of today is 104% of historical average for this date. Next slide, please. Now this, the US Drought Monitor is on the left, and that's one of the many metrics for drought conditions. Even though it is targeted more towards agricultural interests, this map is useful. This map here is from February 1st on the left. And today they released a new map dated February 8th, and their latest map looks nearly the same. Overall, the entire state remains in some level of drought classification, with the majority of the state in that orange shading indicating severe drought intensity. Due mainly to the late December rainfall, this map shows classifications across much of the state have improved over what they were, say, in mid-December, where much of the state was in the bright red extreme classification, and even much of the San Joaquin Valley and Sierra Mountains south of Delta were in dark red exceptional classifications. However, these drought conditions are expected to persist, not improve, over the months ahead. On the right side, you'll see DWR's snapshot of current reservoir conditions statewide. DWR has recently updated this graphic, so it appears a little different from what you may be used to. While this particular snapshot here is from February 3rd, I'll point out that Lake Oroville, which is located around the 12 o'clock position on this chart, which as of today is 46% full, which is 78% of historical average for this time of year. Meanwhile, San Luis Reservoir, which on this graphic is sort of west of the peninsula, is 45% full, which is 59% of historical average for this time of year. Next slide, please. Now with this slide, please accept my apologies for the error in the heading on the slide itself. To be clear, this graph shows customer demand response in meeting the targeted 15% system-wide reduction through mandatory water use restrictions that the board enacted. This graph includes a review of both 2020 and 2021 actual demands in the orange and red lines, respectively. And the new year brings a bright blue color for our new line to track 2022 demands. Since we only have one full month completed, that sky blue dot on the lower left shows actual customer demands for the month of January 2022 only. As you see, customer demands in January, based on the latest data we had available on February 2nd, tracked fairly closely to our 15% conservation target. And that's indicated by the dashed purple line. And that's in the range of customer demands that we saw, for example, in 2015 during the last drought. Next slide, please. And now I'll stay on this slide for just a while to provide major updates on the drought response statewide and locally as it relates to our water supplies. I want to quickly summarize the major updates related to our imported supplies. First, the State Water Resources Control Board continues to monitor Delta watershed conditions, and they've been toggling curtailments on and off for certain sub-watersheds for tributaries such as Cache Creek and Puda Creeks. Currently, there are no curtailments related to either DWR water rights or SFPUC water rights, but the State Board may impose curtailments if dry conditions persist. Now, while the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, or SFPUC, has a total system storage that looks relatively healthy right now, they do remain on course with their emergency declaration and a 10% voluntary system-wide reduction, which results in a 14% cutback to wholesale customers collectively and a 10% cutback to ACWD's SFPUC purchases specifically. Currently, SFPUC is reporting about 9% conservation system-wide. Now, for the Department of Water Resources, or DWR, last month they issued an updated notice of a state water project 15% Table A allocation, while contractors may also receive more water if needed to meet critical health and safety requirements. For ACWD, a 15% Table A allocation is about 6,300 acre feet of new supplies, in addition to the existing state supplies that ACWD has in carryover storage and semi-tropic storage. While the notice of 15% allocation is certainly good news, please do remember that sometimes DWR will decrease the Table A allocations if conditions change during the water year. And as an example, last year, they did start off with a 10% allocation that was later reduced to 5% in March. DWR and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, which operates the Central Valley Project, have withdrawn their joint temporary urgency change petition that they filed with the State Water Resources Control Board that would have sought approval to operate both of those water projects at modified operation conditions for the anticipated dry February through April. However, the two projects rescinded that urgency change petition and noted that with the improved reservoir storage from the storms that they received late last year, they no longer anticipate the need to request those lower standards for operation during those months. Now I want to shift to local supplies. And of course, the late December storms have resulted in a healthy inflow of storage to Lake Del Valle for our local water right on Arroyo Valle. And our local groundwater levels continue to be well managed, with above Hayward Fault, or AHF, at 42.5 feet, and below Hayward Fault is at 12.8 feet, which are slightly better than they were at this point 1 year ago. And lastly, I'll note that planning staff is continuing to monitor for any critical developments, either positive or negative, that may affect our water supply outlook this year. District staff's continuing our enhanced customer outreach during the drought. For example, the public affairs staff is focusing on customer outreach through digital advertising, continued drought messaging on social media, as well as opportunities for continued and enhanced print, television, and radio public service announcements. The water use efficiency staff is reporting sustained increase in customer interest in the water use efficiency programs from their pre-drought levels. The water use efficiency staff is continuing to develop ordinance support documents and procedures, identifying ways to increase participation in our water savings partnership program for income qualified customers, developing a do-it-yourself DIY residential indoor-outdoor survey program with free water saving devices, and finalizing the transition of the turf conservation program to Bosca's online platform. Next slide, please. Now, this is my penultimate slide showing precipitation forecasts. And these forecast graphics were issued last week, but the current versions you'll find today online tell the same story. The near-term forecasts show increased probabilities for below normal precipitation across the state, and that's both for the 6 to 10 day and 8 to 14 day forecasts, as well as the monthly precipitation outlook for February. The longer-term ensemble forecasts provide less certainty, but the outlook provides no clear indication of significantly improved conditions at this time. Since the coming several weeks will round out the peak winter rain season, the next couple of months could be highly determinative in how this water year develops. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Do we have any questions from members of the board? I should ask first if there's any question from members of the public. I see none. I'll bring it to the board. Mr. Ash, DWR is operating Del Val this year in a unique manner. Have we quantified how much additional water will be available to ACWD and Zone 7 as a result of that change in their operations of the reservoir?
Thank you for that question, Director Weed. Yes, you're referring to the changed operations this year when DWR has requested a minor deviation with the Army Corps of Engineers. And that deviation allows DWR to keep Lake Del Val slightly fuller through the winter months, basically encroaching water storage into that flood protection zone that's otherwise required under the plan that the Army Corps of Engineers has developed for that reservoir for flood protection. And so staff certainly has calculated the water supply benefit from the December storm events. And that was a benefit to the district of 2,040 acre feet. And Zone 7 also received that same amount of water. The inflows that we received from those December storms were split equally among those two agencies, given our local water rights. So for ACWD, the volume was 2,040 acre feet.
Thank you. I was surprised that it's that low because it appeared that DWR was operating Del Val at 43,000 acre feet storage at a time when the Corps of Engineers plan called for them to reduce it to 25,000. That was an 18,000 acre foot additional water in the reservoir during the Christmas week. And so I was hoping that it would even be much greater.
Yes, and obviously with operations in this deviation, there is a slight benefit to keeping more water in storage in case we need it later in the year because of dry conditions. So if this were not operating in that minor deviation, perhaps there might be more storage available. However, it is the preference both of the district and of the state contractors to support DWR in seeking that minor deviation for a year like this, where the dry conditions are likely to persist.
Okay. And it struck me that that additional 18,000 acre feet was about equivalent to the amount of water that we were hoping to store in Los Vaqueros. So, thank you. Ourselves in Zone 7, we're looking at 9,000 acre feet in Los Vaqueros. Right. Thank you. All right, are there any other comments from members of the board? If not, then let us move on then. And does that complete the staff presentation on the drought update?
I just want to say excellent presentation, Leonard Ash. Always appreciate your information.
Thank you. And yes, Director Weed, that does conclude my presentation.
All right, thank you. Next, we have the 6.4, which is the general manager's reports. starting with the State Water Contractors Dry Year Transfer Program.
Yeah, President Whedon, for an update on that program, I'll turn it back over to our Director of Water Resources, Laura Hedis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stevenson. So staff just wanted to provide a brief update on this item. Can you hear me okay?
Please.
Oh, thank you. As the board is aware, in 2020, the district participated for the first time in the State Water Contractors Dry Year Water Transfer Program and was successful in securing approximately 1,700 acre feet of water at a price of $350 an acre foot to bolster 2020 supplies. In 2021, the district initially joined in the program to explore options for transfers, but as negotiations continued to show that the volume of water available to the district would be much smaller and the unit prices were anticipated to be too high, the district opted not to continue in the program through the point of executing water purchase agreements last year. But with continued dry conditions this year, the State Water Contractors is again coordinating a dry year transfer program in 2022 to negotiate agreements to purchase water from willing sellers. Staff is proposing to participate in the 2022 program to potentially purchase up to 6,500 acre feet of dry year supplies to supplement other available supplies. Since time is of the essence to make initial requests for potential participation in the program, under the general manager's authority, staff is planning to execute a dry year transfer agreement with the State Water Contractors and remit an administrative deposit still to be determined, but likely in early March and on the order of about $30,000 to be used for administration, environmental, and legal costs for any water purchase agreements that are executed through the program. This agreement does not obligate the district to purchase water, but allows us to keep this option open. In order to receive water that is ultimately secured through the program, the district and other buyers would need to execute individual water purchase agreements directly with any sellers, as well as agreements with the Department of Water Resources for storage and conveyance through state water project facilities. Commitments to execute those water purchase agreements, which at that point would obligate the district to actually purchase the water, would need to be made in the April to May timeframe. So staff would be coming to the board in that timeframe with more information on the amount available, terms and costs, et cetera, and to request board authorization to execute any water purchase agreements that result from the program. So this is really just an initial step that we wanted to make you aware of tonight. I'm happy to answer questions if you have any on this. And that's all I had to share on that program.
President Wade, I think you're on mute.
At the Bosca Policy Committee meeting on Wednesday, I heard for the first time of a project called SWAP. Are we familiar with that, and are we involved in it? And to what extent with the state? What does that do? How proposed to do?
Good question. So I'll just talk super briefly about that. The SWAP program is a program through the Bay Area Regional Reliability Group, and the SWAP stands for, and I think Mr. Ash can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Shared Water Access Program, and they're looking at different options to transfer and share supplies. So we are familiar with that program, and some of our planning staff do participate in those discussions.
Okay. Second, it was mentioned at the same policy committee meeting that as part of the Los Vaqueros project, they were looking at a number of interties with San Francisco and the state water system. Are we up to date on that? And at some point, can we get a briefing on what's being proposed and who's going to pay for it?
Sure, good question. We're always in discussions on some of these different ideas because there are various things being talked about, and I'm sure we could provide a committee update at a future time on some of those projects.
Okay, will that be part of our?
Is okay with that.
Is that separate from the Los Vaqueros investment, or is it part of the overall program?
Well, so San Francisco is a partner in Los Vaqueros, so there would be a nexus there, but also through the Bay Area Regional Reliability Program and this SWAP particular project that you mentioned, there's also discussions or different ideas that could be used through some of other avenues as well.
Maybe the Niles Canyon Aqueduct. All right, thank you. Do we any other questions or comments from members of the board? There being none, then let us move on then to 6.4.2, which is an update on the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes, thank you, President Weed. Just wanted to provide our routine update to the board with regard to COVID-19 and operations at the district. So things are definitely looking up, but it's clear we're not out of the woods yet. First of all, just an update on the stats. So far, we've had a total of 59 positive COVID cases among staff, and that goes back to the very beginning of the pandemic in March 2020. 11 of those 59 have occurred since my last report to the board on January 13. So it's a fair number due to Omicron, but it's a smaller number than the number I reported previously. And at this point, all of those cases except one have been cleared, and we're not seeing a lot in the way of new cases currently. And there still have only been minimal impacts to operations as a result of those cases. So overall, we've been faring fairly well. Our vaccination rate stays at about 83%. And so we still encourage staff to get fully vaccinated and remain boosted. Yesterday, you may have seen that the Alameda County Health Department released a statement that they would be aligning with the state's plans to lift universal indoor masking mandates with certain exceptions. However, just as a note, that ACWD is also subject to Cal OSHA rules, and changes to Cal OSHA rules would be expected to take some time before masking requirements and other measures are lifted or changed. And then, you know, the district wouldn't be making changes to our protocols until not only the county and the state, but also OSHA changes their rules. But also, as a reminder, we've been really trying to ensure that we're being deliberate and careful in how we're handling these requirements for staff. And so we'll be continuing with our existing COVID protocols until those rules have all changed, and probably a little bit of a lag after that before we start changing protocols for our own staff at ACWD. But we'll continue also to maintain our program of mandatory testing for those folks who have not been fully vaccinated. But as we move along over the next few weeks, we are looking forward to reofficing hopefully this spring. At this point, we are planning for reofficing in April. Of course, that's pending further development with COVID and changes to health-related guidance and mandates. But we're really targeting April at this point. But that also means planning for in-person board meetings again. And so right now, we're planning for our August 12th board meeting to be in person. Again, it's tentative right now, and we'll keep the board informed, but I just want to encourage the board to be thinking about attending the April 12th board meeting in person. And then also the committee meetings in April, right? As it stands right now, we have our April 5th Operations and Water Quality Committee meeting. It's likely we'll be trying to hold that in person too, again, pending further developments in these areas. So I think I had a question.
That when you say in person, but those will be for a while hybrid meetings, so people are in quarantine or traveling would be able to attend the meetings?
Yeah, so that's correct. So what we're planning to do is for all public meetings, board meetings, workshops, special meetings, and committee meetings going forward, we plan to have those as hybrid. And it's not just to deal with COVID related issues. It's so that we can really leverage what we've learned over the last 2 years and provide for greater access for public participation. In general, though, we would be looking for the board to participate in person and staff. But really the hybrid meetings would be made available mostly for public participation, but it would allow directors to participate remotely as long as the provisions of the Brown Act are being complied with.
And AB 361?
Well, AB 361 provides for the ability for the board to find that conditions exist such that public meetings shouldn't be held in person. And so again, we're kind of looking at the April timeframe for no longer pursuing virtual meetings under AB 361.
I'd encourage you to have review on whether a hybrid meeting requires AB 361.
Sure, we can look into the specifics of what the framework would be for holding meetings after we reoffice.
Thank you. All right.
So you also may have seen in the news that the governor recently signed a bill providing for additional COVID-related sick leave. And so we're working on implementation of those measures right now. And it's likely that in order to fully implement, we'll need some action by the board. And so right now we're targeting the March board meeting to bring an item to the board to allow us to fully implement those measures at ACWD.
All right, thank you. And I would note that the governor's proclamation that COVID is presumed to be a workers' comp work-related disability remains in force.
That's my understanding.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions about the COVID update?
No, there do not appear to be any. So let us then.
I have President Weed. I have one more meeting report, and
all right,
that will be from our Director of Engineering and Technology, Mr. Grumowalk.
Please, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Good evening, President Weed and board members. As you may be aware, for the past nearly 20 years, the district has been working on the Alameda Creek Fish Passage Improvement Project, which included the installation of rubber dams, construction of fish screens and fish ladders, and associated facilities. Thanks to the guidance of our board, the dedication and hard work of district staff, and extensive collaboration with stakeholders and project partners, we are nearing the completion of this project. I just wanted to inform you that district staff is working on submitting an application for the Aqua Clear Hill Water Agency Award for Excellence, which is due March 1st, 2022. The award recognizes exemplary programs developed by Aqua member agencies. So we are very excited about this opportunity and thought we would share the information with the board. That's my update. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say I'm really happy that we're applying for that award. And I think this is a great project for us to apply for. And I'm cautiously optimistic.
I say if we don't win this award, I question Aqua's judgment.
Hey, as I keep bringing up in different presentations, and I've also mentioned this to Ms. Shireen Gonzalez, I asked engineering to total up the length of our two fish ladders, and it turns out it's 854 feet, 1 foot taller than the Transamerica building in San Francisco, and quite a bit taller than the Bay Bridge Towers. So that's quite a feat. If you put it in a vertical plane, what we've accomplished, and you look at the mass of concrete and steel that's there, it's equivalent to the Transamerica building, which is quite unbelievable.
All right.
And just one final reminder for the board, as long as we're all gathered here today, we do have another board meeting next Thursday, February 17th. It's at 6 p.m. and this will have to do with the district's transition from at-large elections to zone-based elections. So just a quick reminder there. And that completes our general manager's report.
Okay. And that meeting is at 6 p.m.?
6 p.m. next Thursday, February 17th.
Thank you.
For some reason, I had it down for 4 p.m.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. It's 6 p.m. We published it at 6 p.m., noticed it at 6 p.m., so it'll be at 6 p.m.
Okay.
We have been holding these meetings at different times, trying to ensure that we can capture all of the available public's participation. So this meeting is at 6.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, fine. That finishes the general manager's report. We next go to director's comments, reports, meetings attended, and agenda items. There appears to be a not necessarily a water-related meeting of the Alameda County Countywide Oversight Board, of which Director Sethi is the member of the Special Districts Association, and I am an alternate to him. So, Director Sethi.
Yes, I have 4 different reports, 3 which are short. Does any other director have reports they'd like to give?
Well, we'll pass it through. Is there any other one who attended a meeting? So why don't you take it on, Director Sethi?
Okay, so I'm going to do this one last that's on the agenda, but I first wanted to kick off with the fact that Director or President Weed and myself, both as president and vice president of the Washington Township Historical Society, worked with the district to put on a presentation, an hour-and-a-half presentation for the community that was held by Zoom and at the Museum of Local History on the history of the Alameda Creek watershed, the history of the fishery habitat, and our fish construction projects. You may have seen the big article that was in the Tri-City Voice that covered this subject and invited the public to attend. We had 67 people attend, which was a really good turnout between Zoom and the museum. We had 3 speakers, Jeff Miller and Pete Alexander from the Alameda Creek Alliance, and our own Shane Oneski from ACWD. And I wanted to thank our engineering staff for the time they put in on the presentation, and also to Ms. Shireen Gonzalez for coordinating all the public outreach. We had such an enthusiastic feedback that we were getting requests for the presentation up to 10 days after it was held, and we recorded it, so it will be available to anyone who wants to watch the entire presentation. I tell you, I learned a lot that I did not know about what is going on in the Tri-Valley area and in the upper reaches of the Alameda Creek watershed in terms of taking away all the impediments that we have on all our creeks and rivers, especially in Dublin, Pleasanton, and Livermore. It was quite an education just for myself. So thank you for everybody that contributed to that. Number 2, yesterday was our monthly regular meeting of the Los Vaqueros Reservoir JPA. And I gave my first treasurer's report yesterday, and I will just synopsize some information here so that people are informed. I asked, I think you each got a copy of the policy calendar for the year, a 2-pager, which is quite informative. But on the budgetary side, we have a budget of slightly over 50 million through the end of calendar year 2022. And that includes everything through the 3rd amendment of the agreement of the local area partners or local agency partners. About 25 million has come in, distributed about 11 million from the California Water Commission so far in advanced funding, close to 10 million from the local area partners in direct cash contributions, a little over 4 million from those same partners in in-kind contributions. And we've spent about 24 million with about 2 million in reserve, 2 to 3 million. So we're moving forward with a more detailed financial overview, development of an investment policy and debt policy. And lastly, most importantly, if you will see on the calendar that since we're going to run out of money by the end of the year, we're going to go for an interim funding agreement that will take everybody through the end of 2023. And sometime, I guess late next spring, we will have to make a board decision as to whether we want to fully participate through the remainder of the project. Any questions from anybody? So Mr. Wunderlich has been attending as my alternate to these meetings. If you do have any questions, I think he can answer them too. So that's my second report. The third report.
Kathy?
Yes.
Boss Vaqueros, have you taken a position with the organization? The JPA?
I'm the treasurer of the JPA appointed.
Okay, I don't know that we made that announcement the last time.
Oh, I don't remember, but on an 8-0 vote, I was approved as the treasurer of the JPA. So I'm going to have a meeting later this month with the staff that's already in place to learn the responsibilities of each person in that finance group and everything. And just for clarification of the public, this is not a paid position other than my normal per diem as a director on this board. Big title, big obligations, big responsibility, little pay. That's what public service is all about. So, third report is on a presentation that I believe the general manager sent out today or yesterday to all the board members. It's a proposal for a presentation on proposed legislation for putting the fixed charge on the property tax bill and delinquent charges. Last week, General Manager Ed Stevenson, our consultant in Sacramento, Jonathan Clay, myself, and President Weed had a meeting with Assemblyman Lee. And he was very interested in this idea. And so we agreed that we would forward over a proposal since the submittal of bills for this legislative session is ending on Monday. So we're going to try to get something into the hopper there. And secondarily on Assemblyman Lee, he got one of his bills through the legislature last year that was enacted into law, AB 1061, which prohibits mobile park owners from price gouging on water to their residents, which has been a really big problem. The property owner gets the bill and then marks up what the real cost of the water is to each resident. So we agreed that we're going to collaborate together to get the word out across our community through the Tri-City Voice, and also to put a blurb into our aqueduct, which goes out to every address in our Tri-City area. So that was useful as well. And tied in with the same subject, we had our first working group meeting in Aqua, which has members that cut across a number of different committees, not just the local government committee, to try and draft something very formal on this whole subject of putting the fixed charges on the property tax roll and delinquent charges, both the fixed and the commodity charge, on the tax roll. And we were expecting only 4 or 5 people, but we ended up with a dozen people, 4 attorneys, including Claire Collins, General Counsel at Hanson Bridget. We had, I think, 4 general managers, and the remainder were board members. So at the conclusion of that meeting, which President Weed attended as well, we had a lot of really good conversation, lots of really good points that were being brought up by everyone. At the conclusion, I was named the chair for this ad hoc committee, with the vice chair is Claire Collins from Hanson Bridget. So it was a good kickoff meeting today, and we're going to keep plugging ahead with our senior legislative advocate in Aqua, Julia Hall. So that finishes up on those subjects. And then lastly, I asked Mr. Stevenson to put this on the agenda because President Weed and I have been active in the Alameda County Special Districts Association for as long as we've each been respectively on the board. And you may know this better as California Association from the annual conference. We have every single special district in Alameda County that is active in this organization. And I wanted to highlight one responsibility to which I was elected and President Weed is my alternate, and that is to the Alameda County Countywide Oversight Board. And this board has a lot of responsibility, but is not the kind of board that gets reported on in the newspaper. But financially, it has a lot of responsibility. And so I wanted just to give a little background here and where we are. The California Redevelopment Act was first enacted in 1945, giving local governments the authority to establish redevelopment agencies with the task of eliminating blight that impacted development and growth within their communities. And the redevelopment agencies were required to include affordable housing as well as other uses and services to benefit the communities in which they were located. In 1951, this became part of the state constitution, and through a lot of debate in the early 2000s, when Governor Brown was elected to his 3rd term as governor, he fought vigorously to get legislation through to force the disillusionment of all the redevelopment agencies in California. And this was really prompted by the fact that it became acutely aware to many people that the redevelopment agencies were stealing essentially from all the special districts, the school districts in their area, the hospital districts, the community colleges, in order to fund their special projects in the city at the expense of all the other government agencies. And the redevelopment agencies were, under law, the property taxes were frozen in time when these redevelopment agencies were created. And then the subsequent tax increment that occurred every year when property was reappraised went to the redevelopment agency. So imagine with ACWD, for decades, we were giving money away from our property tax revenue to each of our 3 cities. And what Governor Brown got through and went into law February 1 of 2012 was, upon disillusionment, each one of the cities had to put together a successor agency and pay back all of their outstanding recognized obligation payments that would go back to these special districts, and most importantly to education, to the school districts that the state always had to come in and backfill for the school districts. So the Oversight Board was created by law in 2018 to force these agencies, the successor agencies, to clean up their books and retire all of their payments. And what John and I are responsible for, Director Weed, is to make sure that all of these cities are fulfilling the spirit of the law. And so far, the 3 cities in our Tri-City area have closed all their books, so we're clean with them as an agency. The Tri-Valley area has closed all their books, but we have quite a few communities north of us in the county that are still trying to retire things between now and 2030 or 2032. And then we've got 2 special cases that are kind of a burden for everybody. One is the city of Hayward that really wants to drag things out to about 2050, and Oakland, which wants to drag things out to 2050. And that was not in the spirit of the law. People were supposed to retire these things within 10 to 15 years. So we had our annual meeting in January, in which President Weed and I both attended. And for the second year in a row, I questioned and asked for some possible changes in the way Hayward is fulfilling their obligations. I did not vote no, but they agreed that they would come back next year with a plan for the things that I had wished addressed. And for the second year in a row, I was the only board member who voted no against Oakland, because Oakland, in my case, in my opinion, is seriously deviating from what the intent of the law was. And they have been ruled against on multiple occasions by the State Department of Finance. And they keep appealing things into the court, trying to drag things out. They're paying more in attorney fees than you can possibly imagine. So I take this responsibility seriously, and we're talking about, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars per city, depending upon size. And it takes a lot of homework and time to go through the board package because it's very dense in material. So I just wanted to give that kind of an overview of what goes on there, and that our district has been one of the beneficiaries of the retirement of these redevelopment agencies. So I thank you for your time. That was a little bit of a lengthy report, but I appreciate all of the directors and staff attention. Thank you.
President Weed, if I could just add a quick comment to Director Sethi's report on the meeting with Assembly Member Lee. I just wanted to report for the record. I think the other directors are aware, but I just want to credit President Weed and Vice President Sethi for making it very clear to Assembly Member Lee with regard to discussions about water-related charges on the property tax, that this was some thoughts from the 2 individual directors, and they were not representing Alameda County Water District in that discussion on those topics. Just wanted to make sure the record was clear on that, mostly for the public.
All right, thank you. Other comments from board members? I'll make a quick, hopefully brief comment here, that Bosca, and particularly observed a city of Palo Alto City Council meeting where their Bosca representative was proposing to sell 1 MGD of their supply guarantee from Hetch Hetchy, arguing that they could make tens of millions of dollars from that 1 MGD. I think we have 7 MGD. It didn't go anywhere within their council. There was a typical water study where people were talking about the trees on their streets, et cetera, not the 1 million gallons a day that would be applied as a water supply. But water trade, water supply is coming out into play. There were concerns, and Bosque is coming to grips with what its role is going to be in that. There's a difference between water allocations and water guarantees. A clarification of that is going to be beneficial. There's clearly a great deal of money involved. There are projects, including a 3,500 unit housing project and 2 million square feet of commercial space in Brisbane, that's in San Francisco, that South San Francisco is being proposed. Some of these held up by water. The requirement is not a permanent guarantee, it's 25 years for a development. And districts such as ACWD are potentially in a position to negotiate contracts in the tens of millions of dollars based on these numbers were floated out there. So, thank you. Do we have any other items before the board? There being none, then we are adjourned.
And for the record, our time is 9:20 p.m.